Okay. Hope everyone's doing good today. Um, we got a lot of stuff that happened the last couple days. Uh, this month was the start of the Emergencies Act questioning period for political figures, as well as, we got some very interesting stuff to come out of there. Um, We also have a couple updates on CUPE on their stuff there for the early childhood educators and everything. We do also have two fucking mass shootings within a week in America. Like, what's going on there? That's a little bit ridiculous. And then we do have some other news like Elizabeth May stuff, and then like some Alberta stuff, and some some stuff that's been happening in Manitoba. There's been a protest that was going on there not too long ago. So yeah, I guess we can just hop right into the news and stuff.
Minister Blair, will you swear on a religious document?
The first of more than half a dozen Liberal cabinet ministers expected to take the stand this week. Emergency Preparedness Minister Bill Blair defended the government's use of the Emergencies Act.
People were living in a state of fearfulness and intimidation.
The act gave authorities sweeping powers to shut down the 3-week occupation of downtown Ottawa and to prevent border blockades from returning in different provinces. Blair says he saw a clear connection between it all, especially as police resources were stretched in different directions.
We had to resolve the whole situation, and failure to do so failure to resolve in Ottawa would have resulted just continue to like whack-a-mole, chasing border blockades from one point of entry to another.
Blair says it was the border closures and how those cut off essential goods and services that in his mind constituted a national emergency.
The impact that it was having, not just economically, but on people, on families.
Though by the time the act came into force, police had dismantled those border blockades, but the inquiry did.
The funny thing is that the only reason why the police actually did anything about the blockade or the border blockades was because the Emergencies Act was going to get passed either way. Like I honestly think that, the usage of the act itself was actually like necessary at that point in time, because I mean, let's be honest here, the the cops weren't fucking doing anything. Not only because they had moles inside of their forces, leaking documents towards the leadership of the convoy, but you also had you also had some like on board with that, as well as like the provincial governments not wanting to do anything about the blockades and the upholding of Ottawa. So it's not really surprising.
Did hear that Canada's top spy agreed there was a national security threat and told the Prime Minister that the night before he announced he'd use the act.
All of these elements of unpredictability, based on my experience having been around national security issues for.
And the funny thing is that like people are getting all fucking mad and everything. This is literally what the director of CSIS told Justin Trudeau, that he should probably use the Emergencies Act to make sure, that they have privileges and permissions to deal with blockades within Ottawa and at the border crossings, as well as there was foreign influence going on within it as well, like we already know. Like, we've known about this beforehand.
For quite a few years now, led me to believe that the regular tools were just not enough to address the situation.
The inquiry had already heard that CSIS did not see this as a threat to national security, according to its own criteria. But then the head of CSIS testified he learned the Emergencies Act uses a broader definition of a threat, and from what he observed, the bar had been met.
We know the Act fairly well, of CSIS Act. I was not familiar with the details of the Emergencies Act.
Marina, there is just lots of anticipation for this week's inquiry. Witnesses, can you walk us through it?
Yeah, in the coming days, the public will hear from those who ultimately made the decision to invoke the act. We're going to hear from more top cabinet ministers. That includes defense, justice, finance, transportation, public safety, and of course, the Prime Minister himself. He is set to testify on Friday.
Like I said, I'm not, like, when it was popping off and everything, I wasn't surprised that it had, that it was going to be enacted. It was definitely more or less a matter of when, not if. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this week for sure.
And they will all be asked to explain why they believe the convoy endangered the lives, health, or safety of Canadians, and why they believed existing laws wouldn't be enough.
All right, Marina.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, you literally had no one doing anything about it. So it's not surprising that it would be enacted at all.
Von Stackelberg, thank you.
Canada's public safety minister revealing striking new details at the inquiry. Marco Mendicino says the day before the government invoked the Emergencies Act, he got a call from RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki. She had intelligence that the protester blockade at the border in CUPE, Alberta, could turn violent.
She underlined for me that the situation in CUPE involved a hardened cell of individuals who were armed to the teeth with lethal firearms, who possessed a willingness to go down with the cause.
He says Lucki told him officers were undercover with the protesters.
She was justifiably concerned that there not be any leak of this information because lives literally hung in the balance. It was so urgent that I said to her, well, look, I can't just keep this information to myself. At a minimum, I have to be able to share it with the Prime Minister.
Overnight, the Mounties moved in and seized guns. Several protesters were charged with conspiracy to murder.
This was a threshold moment for me. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, after, like, watching the inquiry and everything, from, like, the protesters, the, you know, some of the fucking victims that were downtown and everything, and literally hearing about stuff that was popping off, it was completely unsurprising. Like, when you have people in fucking CUPE, Alberta being like, oh, hey, we're gonna fucking kill people because we're a bunch of fucking psychopaths, then yeah, of course it's they're gonna use some form of justification to do so.
Later that day, the Prime Minister invoked the Emergencies Act. Lucki's warning is a key development. The same day she called Mendicino about CUPE, she also emailed him and said police still had options to end the protests without the Emergencies Act.
Yes, but the fucking police didn't do anything. That's why it wasn't invoked. Because if the cops would have actually decided to do something about it, it wouldn't have been invoked.
But Mendicino testified even if that was the case, the act was still needed, and it worked.
Without significant injury or any fatalities at all.
Sir, the schedule is not as important at getting to the truth.
But proceedings were interrupted. The lawyer for the convoy organizers, Brendan Miller, challenged the commissioner, accusing him of not ruling on some of Miller's requests.
There's no question we want to get at the truth, but you know what? It's a very complex issue, and it's not all about what you want.
Sir, we filed 2 motions in writing.
You're speaking,
that has not
I'm
been
speaking.
ruled on, and they've been filed for
I
days.
will take a break while you're asked to
Sir.
leave. I will return in 5 minutes if security could deal with the council.
It's the second day in a row Miller butted heads with the commissioner.
I mean, yeah, for sure. It's unsurprising that that would be the case. Because he's been pretty fucking wild about it, let's be honest.
And Marina, Brendan
Miller,
was
that
later
is.
let back in, but some of his other comments, I gather, are also getting a bit of a response tonight.
Yeah, it's coming from a communications firm called Enterprise Canada, and this company is pushing back after Miller claimed, without any evidence, that one of Enterprise's employees was at the protest with a Nazi flag. He went on to claim that the
I mean, we already know that there was a swastika there beforehand. We saw it. We saw it when it was initially popping off. We covered it. We talked about it. And it's just so strange to me how they're trying so hard to sweep a lot of the fucking fascist rhetoric within the fucking protest itself underneath the rug. Like, it's completely ridiculous.
the Liberals were in on it, and it was a plan to discredit protesters.
What?
The company says this is false, that not only is their employee actually a Conservative Party member, but there is proof he was in Toronto at the time, not in Ottawa. It has sent a cease and desist letter to Miller and contacted police.
All right, Marina Von.
I mean, yeah, like, this stuff was already, like, known and coming out, like, months ago. And the fact that they're trying to, like, lie about it, it should be alarming to it, or alarming to people. I honestly think that Justin Trudeau, following the head of the CSIS recommendations to enact or to use the act, was the right choice.
Stackelberg in Ottawa.
All right, so as Karina mentioned, the lawyer representing those convoy organizers, Brendan Miller, he was removed from the courtroom earlier today, but Judge Rouleau isn't the only person Miller is clashing with this week. He also made allegations against a man named Brian Fox, a principal at Enterprise Canada, a national public relations firm. And Miller is alleging that Fox was photographed carrying a Nazi flag in Ottawa during the early days of the protest in an apparent attempt to discredit the convoy.
Explain to us why you've named Brian Fox.
Because we have
I mean, it wasn't to try and discredit them. No, like, a vast majority of fucking people were heavily against the fucking convoy, first of all. And, like, we already know who was there. It wasn't trying, like, he wasn't trying to discredit shit. And saying that he is, or that he was, is just kind of silly.
a witness in our application who had met the person with the flag, all right, on the day he was running around with it, and can identify him as Mr. Fox.
Who's that? Okay, Enterprise Canada's president, Jason Leader, is in Burlington, Ontario, and he joins me now. So, Jason, I'm going to get right to it. Was Brian Fox in Ottawa during the convoy dressed in army fatigues and carrying a Nazi flag?
Yes.
No, absolutely not. I mean, in no way, shape, or form. Patently false. An unhinged allegation. We don't know where it came from. We don't know, why this has come up. But I'll just say, Brian Fox was in Toronto that weekend. He hasn't been in Ottawa since February of 2019.
All right, dog. Then who the fuck was walking around with the swastika and shit then? Explain that one.
He was attending, by the way, the Conservative Manning Conference. Brian Fox is a conservative, by the way. That's where this allegation is coming from. That
I mean, like, the new fucking conservatives are just fucking fascists. Let's be honest with ourselves and not fucking beat around the bush. They're fucking fascists. They've literally been saying the fucking Nazi parts out like since Scheer, at least. And they're getting really, really fucking comfortable about doing blatantly obvious fascist shit. The only thing that, you know, they have going for them to be like, we're not fascist, is they're not fucking waving around swastikas. Because the thing is when it comes to fascism, is that fascism will always take the appearance of whichever country it's taking part in. Like, like Canadian fascism will use like the maple leaf and shit like that, right? But I don't know, fucking fascism that happens in like Korea will be completely different. Like, it's so silly.
That we're somehow, you know, our firm is trying to help the Liberal Party or Mr. Trudeau. And you know me, David. You know, your viewers would know me. I've been on this show many times criticizing Mr. Trudeau. I'm a well-known conservative. I ran Stephen Harper's war rooms. I mean, it's a laughable allegation that's being made here.
What?
I don't know why it's being made,
But we literally have fucking evidence that he was there, though. Like, why are they trying to fucking defend this guy so much? Is it just because that, you know, he this is the new direction that the Conservative Party is moving in? Like, that easily could be an option.
But I thought it was important to say, you know, sort of straight away, this is patently false, and it's having some serious implications. I mean, we're dealing with a man who, who is facing death threats now, you know, threats at his own house, you know, phone calls, just an incredible amount of things, terrible things happening as a result of this allegation. And I just want to.
Okay, but what about all the fucking death threats and shit that, you know, a lot of people in downtown Ottawa were receiving when the convoy was popping off? Then explain that one. Then are you gonna discredit their fucking trauma and experiences that they faced because of these fucking hogs occupying the Capitol? Like, that's so idiotic.
I think say to you, the viewers, to everybody that might be watching this, that you know, you can't fall for this kind of a hoax. It is patently false. And
Bro, I swear to God, every single fucking conservative is the exact same. Like, whenever they, you know, are like getting heat and everything, and like have evidence against them for shit that they've been doing, they're like, oh no, that you're wrong about that. That never happened. Like, bitch, what? We literally saw this shit happening. Like, it's idiotic. It is so idiotic that they're saying this shit. Like, it's always the same, like, 3 fucking notes that they play. Because whenever we try to fucking hold conservatives accountable for, you know, usually pretty fucking bad shit, they fucking whine about it.
And we've got to fight back on this kind of stuff.
Okay, but this is an allegation now he's made over a couple of days to a couple of witnesses, even suggesting to the head of CSIS that they were aware of Mr. Fox's presence here and actively covering up. He tried to pursue that again with Marco Mendicino. Why do you think this is happening? If it is, as you say, patently untrue, and as you point out, you know, Brian Fox is a conservative who supported Pierre Poilievre for the leadership of the Conservative Party, as I understand it.
Automatic red flag. If he's fucking supporting Pierre Poilievre, automatic red flag.
Why do you think these allegations are coming up at all?
I can't speak to it. I mean, Mr. Miller's going to have to speak for himself, the convoy lawyer. All I can say, David, is we looked back, right? We looked back at the records, you know, because I said, well, let's look back at where Brian was. Well, you know, he had dinner with his mother-in-law on Friday night. On Saturday, he was, you know, sort of moving around to Toronto. He went to the LCBO and We've checked his credit card records. We know where he was on Saturday. At Sunday, he happened to be at my place. He came for a family visit. We've got photos of that day. So you start to look at this kind of stuff. I can't speak to why some of this might have happened, but it's misinformation. It's an unfounded allegation. It's unhinged, and we've got.
No, it's not fucking unhinged. You guys are being unhinged. Like, it's so fucking stupid. Like, we already know that he was there. Like, this isn't something that you should be fucking lying about. Like, come on, bro.
We've got to clear this up immediately because we can't allow this kind of thing to stand in this kind of a forum. And from our perspective, again, I'm a very prominent conservative. The idea that a conservative, like me, would be working in cahoots with Mr. Trudeau to discredit the Freedom Convoy or whatever the allegation is here.
Okay, so here's the fucking funny thing, is that even if, hypothetically speaking, he was in Toronto, right? He could easily get there, no fucking problem. Because from Toronto, or from Toronto to Ottawa, it's it's literally only a 4.5 hour drive. That's nothing. So even if hypothetically what he is saying is true, we know it's not. It wouldn't matter because he could still easily get there, no problem, and then come back, no problem.
It's absolutely ridiculous, and I think it's having real impacts. I mean, the threats, these kinds of things.
What?
It's got to stop.
Well, what can you tell us about that, about the threats that Mr. Fox is receiving? And have you gone to the police about this? Has there been any attempt to engage law enforcement? Because when these things happen, that seems like an appropriate step. So what more can you tell us about that?
Two things, David. Number one, we appreciate all the support that we're getting. Brian, the firm, everyone is getting a ton of support from people from across the country, sort of saying, "Sorry, you're having to go through this." But yes, law enforcement has been brought in. I mean, we had to. I mean, these are very serious, very credible threats. Time's up. That kind of thing. It's very unnerving to wake up in the morning and look, and you're trending on Twitter, and your inbox is full of either hateful email messages and or voicemails. And I will say as well, like,
oh, boo fucking who? Why are conservatives such big snowflakes? Like, honestly, the thing is that conservatives don't get as many fucking death threats as leftists or even liberals. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, they receive less death threats than, like, I don't know, your fucking blue-haired SJW on Twitter. Like, come on, bro. And then when you get, like, allegedly, like, one fucking death threat or whatever the fuck, you start crying about it and being like, oh, people are trying to be fucking ruthless to me. I'm like, it's like, come on, man, grow the fuck up. Like, yeah, guess what? People are going to do that shit. But when it comes to fucking death threats and shit, guess what? Most of them are fucking pussies. They won't do anything about it.
the nature, forget about just the allegation, the politics, the allegation. The allegation is that Mr. Fox carried either a Confederate flag or a swastika around Ottawa. Like, those are, that's about as bad as you can get in terms of an allegation, a false allegation like the one that we're dealing with here.
It's not a false allegation.
A whole other element of sort of hate and ugly, an ugly allegation. So it's one of the reasons why we're so disheartened and quite frankly angry to see this out there, and why I think this kind of false allegation has to be dealt with squarely right on.
You've had your lawyers at Blake send a cease and desist immediately and requiring Mr. Miller to correct what you call his false statements, and you say that a formal libel notice is forthcoming. Do you intend to take legal action, or are you putting on a notice that he is going to be sued for the allegations that he's made?
We do, and I've heard him, talk about privilege, and I'm not a lawyer. My first political job was with, that very liberal leader Mike Harris, the Premier of Ontario. You know, everybody knows he was a big Liberal. And you know, one of the first days running question period prep for Mike Harris, I knew what you said inside the House was privileged, what you said outside the House was not. So I'm not a lawyer, but I note Mr. Miller is repeating these allegations outside the commission, and I'll be interested to see how the legal systems deals with some of these, because they're false.
Here, so to anyone that doesn't fucking believe me, oops, or fucking buying in his shit, Snopes, a reputable site for debunking a lot of conspiracy theories, agitpropaganda, and other shit, will completely disagree. Confederate flag. On February 16th, 2022, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke in the House of Commons and said that the Conservatives in the country were supporting, quote, Freedom Convoy truckers and protesters who displayed swastikas and Confederate flags. Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas. They can stand with people who wave Confederate flag, Trudeau said. The Globe and Mail report reported that the comment was directed towards Conservative MP Melissa Latzman, who was Jewish. It also published that the comments prompting an uproar in the House of Commons, with some MPs calling Mr. Trudeau to apologize. The Prime Minister was rebunked for his comments by Speaker Anthony Rota. The remarks came during protest by a freedom convoy whose purpose, according to the Associated Press, was to rail against COVID-19 restrictions and Trudeau himself. The protest included a blockade of pickups, cars, and a handful of commercial trucks that ended up choking off traffic at the Ambassador Bridge, the busiest border crossing between Canada and the United States. Other crossings were also impacted, as well as downtown streets of Canada, capital of Ottawa. We found that a small number of swastikas, Confederate flags were indeed displayed by a few convoy protesters. Most of the swastikas or other symbols appeared to be pictured on signs as a way of mocking the protesting government restrictions. According to photographers, at least, one man carried a full-size Nazi flag. We looked into the incident. The incidents of symbols of the hate being cited in Canada, and documented them for this report. First on January 29th, David Chan, a senior parliamentary reporter for CBC News who is based in Ottawa, tweeted a picture that appears to show a protester comparing COVID-19 mandates to tactics carried out by Nazi Germany. Under the Nazi regime, millions of Jews, Soviet civilians, Soviet prisoners of war, non-Jewish Polish civilians, Catholics, and people of multiple other backgrounds were imprisoned and murdered in acts of genocide, whether by gunfire, starvation, gas chambers, ovens, disease, mutilation, or other means. On January 3rd, CBC News reported that a swastika was spotted on an upside-down Canadian flag behind a politician who had, as he gave an interview. Right over here. This again appeared to be a protester voicing their opinion on government restrictions pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic, were comparable to the atrocities of the Holocaust. An Alberta MP said he was not aware a person was flying an upside-down Canadian flag with a swastika on it behind him when he gave a television interview at a protest in Ottawa on the weekend. Michael Cooper, a Conservative MP from St. Albert Edmonton, was given an interview to CBC TV on Saturday afternoon. When the person holding the flag walked behind him, a photo of Cooper is in proximity of a flag to the flag circulated online. After Cooper put out a statement condemning that the person, saying he wasn't aware of the symbol, Nazism is the purest form of evil, and I have always condemned it completely, he said. Whoever flew the flag is personally responsible for that reprehensible decision, and should be eternally ashamed for him or herself. A Nazi flag was carried by another Freedom Convoy protester near others who waved fuck Trudeau flags, according to pictures posted to Twitter by freelance investigative journalist Justin Ling and Member of Parliament Charlie Agnes. Let's see. Ling also tweeted a picture of protesters holding a sign with a vaccine syringe that had the words assassin and Trudeau with SS capitalized. SS as dog whistle. It's a dog whistle for those that don't know. It's usually a way to hide the like the lightning bolt dog whistle. With the SS capitalized twice in the word assassination. This was a reference to the SS or Schutzel. I don't know fucking German, man. Schutzstaffel in Nazi Germany, described by Britannia.com as the black uniformed elite corps and self-described political soldiers of the Nazi Party. Confederate battle flags have been reported as being displayed during some of the protests, as reported by the Times of Israel, an independent who published data on the matter. The number of Confederate flags waved by participants in the protests were unclear. Photos from the protests show Nazi imagery such as swastikas and the SS symbols, intended as a criticism of what they see as tyranny overreaching by the Trudeau government by some of the protesters. In some instances, these were inscribed with upside-down Canadian flags, a traditional way of signaling protest, danger, or distress relating to a nation. More confusing was the presence of Confederate flags from the U.S. Civil War being raised above the throng, commonly associated with racism, slavery, segregation, and white supremacist views. It presents in Canada, the Canadian capital is perhaps more jarring even than its appearance in the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol by pro-Trump rioters. At least one Trump 2024 plague was spotted in the crowd. Which isn't surprising. We've known about that as well. We talked about that as well. In addition to displaying swastikas and Confederate battle flags, the Associated Press reported that some Freedom Convoy protesters have been involved in acts that were under investigation by local police, as Agnes also alluded to in his tweet, those acts included anti-vaccine protesters having, quote, urinated on the National War Memorial, danced on the tombs of the unknown soldier, and used the statue of Canadian hero Terry Fox to display the anti-vaccine statement. We contacted the UCS or USC SOHA, right? SOHA Foundation and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum on their reaction to the news of the sightings of swastikas and the Nazi flag at the Freedom Convoy in Canada. We will update the story if we receive a response to the statement. So when this fucking moron is saying that no, there wasn't swastikas and Confederate flags at the protest, know that he is lying. Okay? Like, we've known about this since February. And the fact that this loser is lying about there not being any swastikas, any Confederate flags at the Freedom Convoy, like, no, it's ridiculous. It's the most idiotic thing that he could say. Like, we've known about it for months, and like the Conservatives are just trying to sweep it underneath the rug because they know that if they fucking aggravate those supporters, which are slowly but surely turning into be their largest voting bloc within the country, they're not going to have a fun time. But that yeah, it's just so frustrating when we have evidence pointing to the contrary, and dumbass conservatives are being like, yeah, no, that's not happening. It's like, come on, bro, we already have evidence against it.
They're defamatory, and they've got to stop.
There's also an attempt, as we understand it, by Mr. Miller to get Mr. Fox and also Supriya Dwivedi, who works for Enterprise Canada and is a frequent commentator on the show, to testify at the inquiry. What's your reaction to that, and will you take any steps as a firm to engage on that should it go anywhere?
Well, I mean, if we're asked, Mr. Fox is, I think, more than happy to go tell Mr. Miller about his political hero Pierre Poilievre and go through his receipts for the Saturday and Sunday of where he got gas and picked up booze in Toronto just to discredit him. I think it would be a big embarrassment for Mr. Miller to have to go through those facts. But I know that Mr. Fox is happy to answer the allegations about what his weekend looked like, because we've got
the frustrating thing about this is that I honestly think that they're gonna that the fucking conservatives and the hogs are gonna be getting away with this. That's the most frustrating part about this, because it is heavily slanted towards them. Like, that is very, very frustrating. Because as we've seen time and time again, it's very, like, the entire fucking inquiry is very, very fucking leaning right. It's so annoying and frustrating.
Receipts. That's the thing. We've got the receipts. We checked into it. For goodness sakes, Mr. Fox was over here in my living room on Sunday afternoon visiting my family. So it's Mr. Miller and these allegations. It's going to be an interesting time if we continue any further on this.
Okay, Jason Leader, thank you so much for your time. That's Jason Leader, the president of Enterprise Canada.
What a fucking liar, dude. Like, it's so, ugh. Like, come on. Like, so frustrating. Ugh.
the situation in Ottawa had been enormously challenging for the people of Ottawa. And I think people were living in a state of fearfulness and intimidation. And frankly, I think it was a very difficult set of circumstances for them there. And I was aware of that, and obviously anxious to resolve that. But I remained hopeful throughout, and I'd like to also sort of be clear to characterize. I believe very much the Emergency Act was a measure of last resort, and that it was incumbent upon us.
And it was used as a last resort. Like, anyone who says that the Emergencies Act wasn't a last resort effort is a fucking liar. Because they had 3 fucking weeks to get their shit under control, and they didn't. And the federal government decided to take action because, no one else was going to be taking fucking action. Like, Doug Ford, he was fully on board with the fucking convoy and shit. Like, we've seen all the fucking dog shit things that he was on board with during that. And the fact that Pierre Poilievre is supporting this shit is like, yeah, no, it's terrible.
To, first of all, either exhaust all existing authorities or acknowledge that they would not be successful and could not be used for a number of different reasons. And we were hearing that type of feedback from law enforcement about the enormous challenges they were facing. We were also hearing about how stretched their resources were being pulled because of events that were taking place in different parts of the country that required them to respond to one place, but then be required in other places. And that was a challenge that we were hearing quite frequently as well. But I will also tell you, I became very concerned because one of my responsibilities as the Minister for Emergency Preparedness is the resiliency and safety and security of critical infrastructure. And we define critical infrastructure as 10 different sectors of critical infrastructure. And in particular, as it relates to this event, it includes such things as manufacturing, our transportation routes, the essential supply lines, the movement of essential workers. What I was witnessing at the Ambassador Bridge, at CUPE, at Emerson, and then in a number of different venues that I would where we would see similar activity being threatened to be done at Point Edwards, at the Peace Bridge, at the Pacific Highway in British Columbia. That escalation, and I viewed as a significant escalation because it did result in significant disruption of critical supply lines, the cutting off of essential goods and services, the impact that it was having, not just economically, but on people, on families, and people were being laid off their jobs, and factories were being idled. I was also concerned because I'm aware, being a person from Ontario, that the integrated manufacturing processes in Ontario, particularly in the auto sector, but in many other manufacturing sectors as well. Prior to being public safety minister, I was also the Minister of Border Security. And so it really did give me an understanding and appreciation of how important the integrity and functioning of that border is to our prosperity, to our economy, and to the well-being and health and safety of Canadians. And so when those borders were essentially closed, and that the movement of goods and services, particularly some of the parts that go into our factories, was being essentially stopped, it was hugely impactful. And I believe that it had risen to the level of a national emergency. We were also seeing, frankly, the information that we received from the RCMP on or around February 10th, that they believed that there were firearms present at CUPE, and then subsequently, I believe on the 13th.
I mean, it's not that they were believed to be there, it's that it's the fact that they were there. And you had psychopathic hogs that were threatening to use them on the RCMP. Which, don't get me wrong, I don't like the RCMP, but still, come on, bro. Like, if you're claiming that you're so, like, pro fucking RCMP, you don't fucking do that shit, bro.
13th and 14th, when they completed their criminal investigation and arrested people and seized a number of firearms, it also, for me, elevated concern about public safety and the risk that not everyone involved in these protests represented, but embedded within these protests, the possibility, certainly in Alberta, of violence and even serious violence taking place. And so for me,
as well as Ontario or Ottawa as well.
that it was having, not just in the city of Ottawa, but I don't want to minimize what was going on in Ottawa by any stretch of the imagination, but right across the country, particularly as it pertains to critical infrastructure, for me, elevated the situation to a national emergency. I would also observe as well, I believed that there was strong evidence that what was the fact that this protest was so well entrenched in blockades in Ottawa really anchored what was taking place even right across the country. There was, in my mind, a clear correlation between the activities of border blockades and what was taking place in Ottawa. And it also, for me, highlighted the need. We had to resolve the whole situation, and failure to do so failure to resolve in Ottawa would have resulted just continue to like whack-a-mole, chasing border blockades from one point of entry to another. There are 119 border points of entry, land border points of entry in this country, plus our airports, and all of them are vulnerable to this type of unlawful action. And in my opinion, that represented a serious threat to our national security and became a national emergency.
I mean, yeah, he's absolutely right.
Let's bring our senior political correspondent for CTV News Channel, Michael Couture, on this. So, Mike, today we've got CSIS that's there. We've just showing that shot there. Bill Blair is also expected to speak today. What are you keeping a close eye on? This is another, I mean, it's been very interesting week after week, but it really comes down to this week now.
Yeah, I wonder if we can even say, Angie, that there's been a boring week. I mean, maybe a bit of a lull last week, certainly, but
Last week was very fucking boring.
Peeling back the layers and peeling back the curtains behind the scenes of some of the decisions that were made and some of the calculations that were made. And that's what we're seeing today, really. The head of CSIS, the deputy head of CSIS as well, talking there, as well as the person who runs ITAC, which is essentially the terrorism assessment group within the government that really sort of was looking at the convoy. And what is interesting here is how they are constantly assessing these threats, and not necessarily how it was directly in the convoy, but people that began to associate themselves with the convoy. We're seeing a number of briefings and briefing notes that have been presented to cabinet and been presented to some of the ministers, and talking about all along the way that they were monitoring here and that they were seeing and what they were seeing. And interesting to note here, the reason that this is very key is because in invoking the Emergencies Act, the Trudeau government basically cited Section 2C of the CSIS Act, which essentially says that there would have been a serious risk of political violence. CSIS, up until this point, has said that there was not, they didn't think that such a threat existed according to the definition. Still, though, obviously they were engaged in it, and what we were seeing, that part of it, what they were looking at, Angie, was this IMVE, as it's called, or ideologically motivated violent extremism. And they were noticing people that they were already watching in that space that were potentially attaching themselves to the convoy, and that is what was key here. A couple of the different assessments that they were looking at, one on January 27th, there was a report to the public safety minister. They already had awareness of some of these people in this IMVE space that were attaching themselves to the convoy. Have a listen to how this was described by David Vigneault. He's the director of CSIS.
What I think is very important to remember, as in this event and other events of the sort that we've seen in the U.S. and other democracies, is that there could be a very quick turn of events. You know, there could be very quick radicalization or shift in the dynamic of these. So at that point, we did not see. So the 27th, when the report was written, we were not seeing any tangible plots of violence. But that's not to say that there was no risk.
And that's why, Angie, they said they were monitoring it on a daily basis and making sure that they were giving regular briefings and making sure that they continued to watch that space because of how quickly it could turn.
Yeah, indeed, sort of that day by day. How do you think, Mike, Canadians are going to perceive all of this? You were there on the ground as we were covering the convoy and the heart of it. A great deal of division on both sides. With all that we've heard over the last few weeks and now leading up to this week, from your perspective, how do you think Canadians are going to perceive what they've been listening to, what they're
Well, likely it could be that people will just basically confirm what they felt based on what they're hearing here. In other words, so far what we've seen, Angie, throughout the course of the last couple of weeks is, police officers and police forces that were perhaps lacking communication and disarray. And if you are somebody who may have been sitting there on the sidelines thinking that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was right to bring in the Emergencies Act, then you may be a little more hardened in that stance, saying that, look, the Prime Minister had no choice but to act like this to finally get it out of the way. If you thought that this was an overreach, then you're sitting back and looking at this and saying, well, police had all the tools on the table, and they admitted that they still needed time, where they could have had some more time to do more, and that this could have been a policing solution. So I think what will really be interesting in the framing going forward here, Angie, is how the ministers will try and shape this and shape their decisions and give the reason behind their decisions. That is something that I'm looking forward to. And I think very interesting that the last person to speak here will be Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And you'd have to think that there will be very little daylight in terms of the communication strategy and in terms of the actual lines that we will be hearing between the ministers and the Prime Minister, because they were likely all on the same page behind the scenes when it came to trying to clear this here in Ottawa. And it'll be interesting to see if there is any little deviation there, Angie.
Expecting a very consistent narrative, Mike, but as you point out, little nuggets there we might be able to capture, and we'll see where we get. Okay, our senior political correspondent for CTV News Channel, Mike Couture.
Morning, sir. Good morning. For the record, my name is Brendan Miller. I'm counsel to Freedom Corp, which is the entity representing the protesters that were in Ottawa in January and February.
Good to meet you.
2022. First, Professor Lemetti, it's actually an honor to meet you. I've used some of your articles in my litigation practice, so I'm a fan. In any event, sir, we'll just get right into this. As the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, your powers and duties come from the Department of Justice Act. That's correct?
And in part the common law, so the Department of Justice Act in particular with respect to the formal roles.
Right. And under Section 4 of that Act, your powers and duties include that you shall see that the administration of public affairs is in accordance with the law. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And under B, it also has you as the superintendents of all matters coming within the administrative justice federally. Is that fair?
That's fair. There are nuances in terms of how that plays out, but yes, that's fair.
And then under Section 5B, you shall have the regulation and conduct of all litigation for or against the Crown or any department. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that, of course, includes the Department of Justice, including the legal team here today.
Indeed, it does.
Yes. And you might have, I'm sure you've got it, that in a ruling yesterday, Commissioner Rouleau ruled that the Department of Justice nor the parties were able to produce any legal authorities for the GOJ to redact records on the basis of parliamentary privilege. Are you aware of that?
I'm not particularly aware of that. Normally, the parliamentary privilege is dealt with by others, such as the clerk, and that's an ongoing discussion. So I'm not aware of the particulars of that rule.
So what Justice Rouleau ruled was that there's just no authority for redacting documents on the basis of a parliamentary privilege. So I'm wondering if under your powers, under Section 5 sub D of the Department of Justice Act, if you can direct that the Department of Justice release all the records that they've provided in this proceeding with the redactions for parliamentary privilege unredacted.
Mr. Commissioner, I don't think that's an appropriate question. It doesn't suit the purposes, fall within the purposes for which Minister Lametti is here to testify. My friend is well aware that you have made a ruling and this is something to be dealt with through the normal commission processes and not through a witness.
Very well. And from being a lawyer and a law professor and attorney general, I take it you have an intimate understanding of solicitor-client privilege. Is that correct?
A reasonably good one, yes.
And of course, you also have an understanding of Section 39 of the Cabinet Evidence Act and Cabinet Confidence. Is that fair?
Again, a reasonably good understanding.
Now, one of the documents produced by DOJ in the record, and I'm assuming it was just produced to prove it was done, is the redacted legal opinion. It's just the document itself that was given to Cabinet. It's fully redacted. But of course, you agree that Cabinet received a legal opinion about the Emergencies Act. Is that fair?
I will not confirm.
I'm going to object to this question. It gets into areas of solicitor-client privilege.
Okay. Now we have evidence in this proceeding from the Privy Council Office and Ms. Jody Thomas that the Government of Canada's position is that, of course, as you said, that Section 2 of the CSIS Act has a different meaning and that it has a different scope based in its reference in the Emergencies Act. That's right?
I will neither confirm nor deny that. I spoke giving an opinion based on the text of the Act. That is, as I was careful to point out at the time, that was neither a waiver nor a confirmation of any advice that was given based on that text and based on the facts that were given. I took great care to not link the two, and I have no comment on what Ms. Thomas said. I will leave that to our lawyers to discuss in final argument.
Right. And but you've testified to the same thing, that you're going to leave it to counsel. And I take it that as a lawyer in preparing for your testimony here today, you reviewed all the relevant records and documents that you had access to and in your possession and power to obtain. Fair?
I reviewed documents, yes.
Yeah. In the record and the proceedings and the documents that you reviewed, and the ones that we have available unredacted, can you point to me of a document, of a record in this proceeding that existed prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act, where there's any recording whatsoever or discussion that there is a broader scope of Section 2 of the CSIS Act when it is applied to the Emergencies Act? Can you point me to a document that says that?
Mr. Commissioner, I think that's an inappropriate question. There are thousands and thousands of documents in the record.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't there like a fuck ton of documents within those records? Like, I think that he's probably like he would probably refer to one of the individual ones. I think he would just cherry pick the one that sides with him most likely, which would most likely be an exception.
It's unfair to the witness.
I'll then narrow it down. Was there any such document that you reviewed in preparing for your testimony here today that existed prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act, that it was discussed, that isn't subject to solicitor-client privilege, that it was discussed that there was a broader scope of Section 2 as it applied in the Evidence Act?
Once again, that's a question that's asking me to effectively divulge legal arguments. I remind my learned friend that it is very odd to put a lawyer on the stand. I'm really here as a cabinet minister in order to speak to facts.
I know.
And it is to some extent an obligation for me to try to answer questions as best I can. But you're asking me to answer questions as a lawyer, and it would be remarkable to put a lawyer up on the stand in the middle of the case.
I understand, sir. And so, again, I would like the question answered. Did you see any documents that talked about this interpretation that you're discussing that existed prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
Again, I'm going to rely on solicitor-client privilege there.
And, sir, as the Attorney General...
Like what? Like, dog, he wouldn't have... I don't think he would have access to those, or to like, these documents that he's fucking claiming he does. Like, I honestly don't think that he would. Like, the only people I can actually think of that would have it, based off of my limited knowledge, would be, like, the Prime Minister and CSIS. I don't think that this guy would have access to it. I could be wrong, though.
Of the country, of course, you have ultimate authority both to and to advise on when to waive solicitor-client privilege, do you not?
That's not true. Solicitor-client privilege is not mine to waive. It is up to the governor and council to waive.
Right, but you advise on that.
I could advise on that, yes.
Right.
But I don't think he would.
Remind council that this is a right that the Supreme Court of Canada has said is a quasi-constitutional right. It is fundamental for good governance, as it is fundamental for any relationship between a solicitor and a client, that the solicitor be able to give full and frank legal advice, including all its warts, to a client. In my case, the client is the Government of Canada and my cabinet colleagues, and the Department of Justice needs to be able to tell truth to power. In order to do that, I have a responsibility to rely on solicitor-client privilege, and the Supreme Court has effectively held that this is one of the highest forms.
I'm not going to ask you that question.
That's a good response.
But I take it,
That was a really good response.
as an eminent law professor, an academic, with many publications you have, that between February 13th and 14th, when you were considering this decision, you didn't personally believe that Section 2 of the CSIS Act was any different in the Emergencies Act, did you?
Again, you're asking me to give legal advice.
No, I'm asking
or advice that I might have given to the governing council.
No, I understand, but I'm asking.
I don't think that's something that he would necessarily be able to give away anyways. So I don't even understand why he's trying to pry so hard for it.
What you personally believe as a member of cabinet.
I am in this case, I can't distinguish that because of the dates and the context that you've given me. You're asking me to apply facts to law, and I can't do that without breaching solicitor-client privilege. I'm not sure you've understood the point.
I understand.
I don't think so either. He's a dumbass hog.
Lawyers that sometimes we give advice and it's not followed, and I'm not asking you to tell me what you advised. I'm asking you as a member of cabinet, was it your personal belief that on February 13th or 14th, did you?
I think that, if I recall correctly, I think CSIS came to a conclusion with all of its members, if I'm not mistaken.
You personally believe that Section 2 of the CSIS Act had a different scope in the Emergencies Act as now being argued? Was that your personal belief?
Mr. Commissioner, the problem here is that asking that personal belief of the Attorney General of Canada inherently gets into matters of solicitor-client privilege. I object to the question.
Sir, I'm asking his personal belief as also a member of cabinet.
I'm not sure. I mean, he's there as Attorney General.
Yeah, he's not a member of cabinet. He's the Attorney General, my guy.
A member of cabinet.
This guy's a fucking idiot.
We're running into.
But again, you understand under Section 4 of the Department of Justice Act, it's your duty to see that the administration of public affairs is carried out in accordance with the law.
Absolutely.
And
if you were to ask me the factors that were going on, the events that were going on across Canada that I deemed to be important as a member of that cabinet, I would answer the question. But you're asking me to interpret facts through the law, which is the kind of advice an attorney would give, and I won't do that.
Right. And I don't want to know about what you would give as an attorney.
Like, not gonna lie, the Attorney General is looking really fucking good comparatively to this fucking clown.
But with respect to what you actually gave. But when you're advising on whether to waive solicitor-client privilege, what factors do you consider?
Again, you're asking me a hypothetical question. I would, in probably virtually all cases, advise that it shouldn't be waived, simply because it is such an important fundamental principle.
But you can agree that it's been waived in the past by the government?
I only know of one example.
Okay. Now, just one
You're
last...
going to have to wrap up.
Yeah, I am. And just dealing with Section 39 of the Evidence Act, we just had that. I had mentioned that. You understand that, of course, Section 39 of the Evidence Act applies to cabinet confidences?
Would you read me the provision of the Act or show me the provision of the Act, please?
It's...
I get 38 and 39 mixed up.
Okay. No, it's...
Please show me.
I don't have the ability to show it to you, but Section 39.
Come on, bro. Come on. If you're going to be going this fucking hard on it, you should bring that. You should bring your resources, my guy. Come on, bro. Like that's I think that's basic lawyer shit, is it not? Like you should be having that shit with you. Come on, my guy.
It speaks to confidence is the Queen's Privy Council. Can we agree about that?
I really would like to see the text.
Okay.
Again, there are a number of numerous texts that I read.
He doesn't
on a
have it.
day-to-day basis, and I would like to see the text.
Can you agree with me that it's your understanding that a cabinet confidence is something, or a record that's a cabinet confidence or has a cabinet confidence in it, is something that cabinet would have knowledge of? That someone within cabinet would have knowledge of the contents of the document?
Cabinet confidence is wider than simply what is discussed at cabinet and the recorded version of those. But with that caveat, yes.
Okay. And so with the Section 39 redactions that are in all the correspondence between staffers, everything the staffers say, cabinet would have knowledge of that then?
That's, again, that's a legal opinion you're asking me to give on a controversial point.
Thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
The fuck was that? That was fucking horrible, man. He made the Attorney General look good. Come on, bro.
Before we take the break, I just have a quick application. I apologize, sir. I think it's important. I've just met Mr. Alexander Cohen. He's present in this room. And sir, Mr. Cohen, as we have heard throughout this proceeding, has relevant and material evidence to this proceeding's mandate. He has very relevant evidence with respect to the inquiry as to the circumstances, as to the invocation of the Emergencies Act. He also has relevant and material information with respect to misinformation, of which this commission has been tasked with exploring, beginning with the text messages between himself and Mary Liz Power that are already in evidence, in building the narrative with respect to the protesters in Ottawa being extremists, and thereafter
But they were, though.
setting out that they are in fact proprietors of Nazi symbolism. Sir, this commission has been hearing from various...
Can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
What's your application?
I'd like to call him as a witness, sir.
Well, have you written any, is there a...
I didn't expect that we would have the opportunity.
Well, you haven't at the moment. There's no application. So
Well, this is my application, sir. I'm making it orally, and I'm asking for the commission to have him testify after the minister. He has relevant material information.
I'm not going to do this orally right now.
Well, sir, we're given 15 minutes to cross-examine, to elicit relevant and material evidence. And we have relevant and material witnesses here. The Government of Canada has redacted without lawful authority all of these statements from these staffers and have suppressed records.
I mean, that's just normal protocol, though. That's how that works. Like, what?
I have no idea at this point where this is going, so I'm going to take the break. And if you can speak to Commission Counsel, which I think I've repeated many times, is the way to at least raise the issue.
Yes.
And then we'll see if they can resolve it or not. But we have a schedule. And
sir, the schedule is not as important at getting to the truth.
There's no question.
Hell yeah, your truth, brother. It's not my truth. I don't agree with it, brother. Like, could they not have found like a fucking worse lawyer for this? Like, oh my god.
We want to get at the truth, but you know what? It's a very complex issue, and it's not all about what you want. It's about what the commission needs to do, what the parties want to do.
And I think it's what Canadians are entitled to, sir.
I'm trying to control a process. And we have witnesses, we have a schedule. It's been going for a while. Please speak to Commission Council. We'll see where we go, and we'll take the morning break.
Sir, I understand, but I just asked for a ruling after the morning break. Thank you.
So we'll take 15 minutes.
Sir?
Okay, the Commission Council has not completed her
I understand, but
presentation.
sir, and your council's advised you that,
No,
I know you've directed, you wanted the
I'm sorry,
application.
I'm speaking.
Yes, sir.
The application, if you want to do it, you've been advised it's to be done in writing, not in the middle of the
Sir, we
presentation.
filed 2 motions in
So
writing at your direction
sorry.
that you've refused to rule on with respect to the redaction
you're-
of documents from the Government of Canada.
You're
That
speaking,
has
I'm
not been
speaking.
ruled on, and they've been filed for
I
days.
will take a break while you're asked to
Sir?
leave. I will return in 5 minutes if security could deal with the council.
Commission's in recess. La commission est levée.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau knew his government was making a controversial decision last winter, giving law enforcement agencies sweeping, never-before-used powers to clear protests in Ottawa and elsewhere that had started as anti-vaccine mandate demonstrations but had morphed into something bigger and, in the view of some officials, something more dangerous.
The convoys were feeding off of each other, that they were causing significant economic instability, that the violent rhetoric was increasing rapidly and exponentially.
As the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, Jody Thomas was one of the most influential voices advising Cabinet to invoke the Act. She testified at the Commission that that was the right call.
We needed to take swift and decisive action to bring this national crisis to an end.
But her view was not shared by all. The Ontario Provincial Police, for example, said the protests could have been cleared without either of the federal or provincial Emergencies Acts.
In my humble opinion, we would have reached the same solution with the plan that we had without either of those pieces of legislation.
Evidence has emerged that RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki thought invocation of the federal act was premature, that not all tools in the toolbox, as she put it, had been used. That said, she testified...
I mean, that's because the fucking dumbass provincial governments didn't want to do anything. Like, how is that, like, his fucking problem?
That the powers given police did help.
Those authorities ended up to be useful with the plan.
Protesters themselves have been commission witnesses, and not surprisingly, they think the Trudeau government overreached.
I never had an agenda. I literally just wanted
No,
to
you
help
had
some truckers drive across Canada and stand in front of Parliament with some signs.
No, you had an agenda. Everyone has a form of political agenda when they do something like this. So saying you do not have an agenda is a fucking lie.
That was literally what I had envisioned.
The first politician to testify at the commission this week will be Bill Blair. He's the former Toronto police chief who is the Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
I'm not here to debate with you.
He will be one of 8 cabinet ministers, including the Prime Minister, who will take the witness stand before the commission renders its verdict. And it's a verdict it must give to the House of Commons no later than February the 20th. Farah.
David Aiken in Ottawa. Thank you, David. Mike, good to see you. So a lot has really come out today. We're sort of anticipating there was going to be a lot of information. But highlight for me what really stood out for you.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you talk about, how much has come out. This, Angie, we've spoken about this a number of times, that, this is really like peeling back the layers of an onion, but also really getting that inside look to discussions and what was happening in cabinet, but also behind the scenes with different levels of government. So what Marco Mendicino said just a few moments ago was basically that by that first weekend, it became apparent to him and to others that it was virtually impossible to enforce the law on Wellington Street right behind me on Parliament Hill. And then that was something that was of grave concern to him, especially when you consider how entrenched they were and when you consider what was also popping up around the country. He continued to say that throughout his testimony, that he was not just focused on the National Capital Region, what was happening on Parliament Hill, but a number of the other different protests that were popping up at border crossings and, as he had said, interrupting supply chains. One of the things that he is also talking about here that I wanted to sort of key in on is how he noted that there were protesters, but then that there were others in the organizers that were really interspersed everywhere in a lot of the protests. There was concern that if they did announce publicly how many more police officers were coming to Ottawa, that there would be an organizational shift within the protest and that they would bring more people to Ottawa. But he also talked about this area on Coventry Road here, just east of Ottawa, in the parking lot of a baseball stadium, which was supposed to be a parking lot for a number of these trucks. It turned into a de facto base camp and refueling station. And I say that because there were food tents. It was a well-organized system there that we had seen. They even put portable saunas where people were sort of going to relax. And this is something that you had Mendicino talking about in terms of how well organized they were, but also the different factions within the protest. Have a listen to how he explained it.
There was a discussion of two different groups that were at play in the blockades. There was a large group, again, of Canadians who were exercising their lawful right to protest against certain policies by the government. But then there was another group that had other more extreme objectives that was much more sophisticated and organized. And it's my recollection that that latter group was interspersed in a number of different locations very tactically, but that there was a concentration of that latter group at Coventry Road that was made up potentially of individuals who had previously served in either the military or in law enforcement. And that to me raised a concern, a very serious concern, about some of the counter operations that could be run by that group to overwhelm legitimate law enforcement.
What?
And he was saying that that was one of the biggest concerns that you heard in that clip, that Marco Mendicino was worried about the overrunning and them being overwhelmed, and how organized the group was, that no matter how many officers were brought in those middle stages of the protest, that there would be counteraction by the protesters because they were so well organized.
Indeed, and we heard that as well. Sort of heard clearly, as he pointed out, from then Chief of Police, Peter Slowly, who did say that they were outnumbered and that they needed help, even quoting a number there that sort of caused a little bit of concern, as that he needs to go through the proper channels, but said clearly, though, we were hearing that they were outnumbered and they needed the resources. Mendicino saying, of course, we're now there to support the police in any way which we can. I want you to also sort of highlight for us then the conversations that were happening on the trilateral level. He mentioned there the federal, provincial, and municipal, and needing to ensure that they were having everyone at the table. A little bit of pushback. I'm going to refer, little in a mild way, if you will, if we go back to the text messages that were happening there between Marco Mendicino.
I don't think we can read that on air, Angie.
No,
or at least
I'm actually surprised that she read it on the air. I had to take a double take there, but the tension that was there, then slowly, I guess, sort of it being softened with the conversation with Doug Ford.
Yeah, and it was interesting because it was that discussion with then Solicitor General Sylvia Jones, and you also had Marco Mendicino, and it was sort of relaying this in a text message between staff and how it all played out. And essentially, they described it as frosty, and then colorful language that was used by Sylvia Jones in terms of the pushback from the federal government, saying, "I am not your expletive deleted here boss," or "you are not my expletive deleted here boss." And so interesting, because there was that tension that we had already seen that was talked about by Jim Watson, then Mayor of Ottawa, who talked about how Ontario was resisting coming to the tripartite meetings. You had Mendicino talking
I mean,
about
we already
how
knew
there
about
were
that, though.
conversations. He still had lines of communications open. And that
Like, we already knew, like, even beforehand, like, they were going to resist coming.
he did get a call from Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, where they did talk about how Ford was going to take down the mandates and was going to move in a different direction when it came to the health recommendations. But he also said that he would stand there in support of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau if there was some more movement there. So it's interesting how that sort of interplay happened in the negotiations behind the scenes, and how that was really sort of playing out at that time, Angie. And he sort of concluded with saying that they do have a decent relationship now, and a decent working relationship, sort of with a nod to the fact that it was a stressful time for everyone in that moment of time.
Yeah, indeed, and we're going to continue to follow it, as well as that this is just sort of the first part of the testimony. The other lawyers will also be coming to question Mendicino as well. Okay, certainly already start off to an interesting day.
We were concerned about whether or not the blockade might target the Prime Minister. This was a movement that in some cases was prepared to attack our democratic institutions to force change.
Mendicino also told the commission events at the border in Coutts, Alberta earlier this year played a significant role in influencing the government's decision to invoke the act. David Aiken reports.
In my opinion, this was an illegal protest that was national in scale.
That opinion, held by Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, appears to have been widely held by Trudeau's cabinet and some of his most senior advisors. That's according to testimony given in this final week of hearings by the commission reviewing the government's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act last winter.
In ultimately forming the opinion that we needed to invoke the Emergencies Act, one of my main concerns was the inability to enforce the law adjacent to critical infrastructure.
That critical infrastructure the government was worried about was not just border crossings and highways, but Parliament Hill itself.
These are federal democratic institutions, but we did not have total jurisdiction over that space.
The tipping point for Mendicino was the situation at Coutts, Alberta, where undercover RCMP officers discovered weapons among those blockading the border there. 4 protesters were arrested, each charged with conspiracy to commit murder, among other things. And even though the Coutts blockade was resolved before the Emergencies Act was...
And the funny thing is that the Conservatives are completely okay with these kind of people, and are saying that it's undemocratic and whatever, that they locked up fucking psychopaths that were planning on fucking murdering people.
Was invoked on February the 14th. Mendicino said the RCMP operation at Coutts was what he called a threshold moment.
I was extremely concerned that this had reached a new height of both urgency and emergency.
A lawyer for the convoy organizers wanted to challenge Mendicino's opinions, but that lawyer, Brendan Miller, got kicked out of the commission room for arguing procedure with the judge overseeing the process.
You're speaking, I'm speaking.
Ruled on, and they've been filed for days.
I will take a break while you're asked to leave.
Miller then claimed the whole process was unfair, set up to blame former Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly for the events leading up to Cabinet's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act.
They have tried to turn this entire proceeding into an inquiry about the failures of Chief Slawley, as opposed to...
I mean, but he literally did fail, though. He failed to take any action. He failed to do anything about those who, or those officers who were leaking confidential information to the organizers. Like, come on, bro. It is 100% a failure on his fault, or on his part.
Actually about the invocation of the Emergencies Act.
More cabinet ministers testify Wednesday, including Justice Minister David Lametti. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
Things this week are getting interesting for sure.
The Emergencies Act inquiry heard more critical testimony, with proceedings that got so heated, one lawyer was told to leave. CTV's Judy Trin was there.
The lawyer for the Freedom Convoy, tossed for breaking the rules.
Come outside.
Brendan Miller verbally demanded the addition of a new witness instead of submitting a written application, testing the commissioner's patience.
I'm speaking.
It's not been ruled on, and they've been filed for days.
I will take a break while you're asked to leave.
Miller was frustrated with a process he felt wasn't transparent enough.
They have tried.
I mean, the thing is that he was incredibly fucking transparent about it. You know, bring the fucking evidence and shit that that is required. Like, how is that so hard? Why is this guy such a moron? Like, come on, bro. If the freedom morons, you know, are like, if this is the best that they could do, they deserve to fucking lose. But I don't know. Maybe something. Maybe they won't fucking lose. Who knows, man?
Tried to turn this entire proceeding into an inquiry about the failures of Chief Slawley, as opposed to actually about the invocation of the Emergencies Act.
Inside, the public safety minister defended the use of the Emergencies Act, even as he admitted to disregarding this email from the RCMP commissioner. On February 13th, Brenda Lucki wrote that police had not yet exhausted all available tools available through existing legislation.
I don't recall exactly when I would have seen it.
Marco Mendicino said alarming developments in Alberta overshadowed the email. The RCMP had uncovered a plot by extremists gathering at the CUPE border blockade to kill police.
They had ideologically extremist views and symbolism that was attached to the group that they were prepared to go down with the cause.
On February 14th, hours after the CUPE's arrest, the government passed the Emergencies Act. Lawyers for the Alberta and Saskatchewan government have said they were not consulted on suspending civil liberties.
Their fucking vehicles were egged.
Said there had been broad discussions about how to deal with the growing protests.
There was an ongoing and active effort, both at the level of ministers but senior officials supporting them, to reach out to provincial jurisdictions.
After apologizing to the commissioner, the Freedom Convoy's lawyer was allowed to return to the proceedings. And Omar,
I wonder if he's gonna get kicked out again. I have a feeling he might get kicked out again and then whine about it because he doesn't want to follow the fucking rules.
In the home stretch, there are only 3 more days left in this inquiry.
All right, Judy Trin in Ottawa tonight.
All right. The commissioner leading the Emergencies Act inquiry has dismissed an application from the lawyer representing the organizers of the self-styled Freedom Convoy to compel witnesses to testify about who brought Nazi and Confederate flags to the protest. The Public Order Emergency Commission released the decision Wednesday. In it, Commissioner Paul Rulli said Freedom Corp lawyer Brennan Miller has raised serious allegations with little foundation in evidence, which we've been seeing over the course of the weeks, that he, you know, just doesn't have any fucking evidence for anything that he's citing for the most part. Miller sought to have 4 additional witnesses testify at the commission hearings, including Brian Fox, a partner at the political consulting firm Enterprise Canada. Miller alleged at the commission Monday, without citing evidence, that Fox had brought a Nazi flag to the convoy protests in Ottawa earlier this year to discredit the protesters. Miller also alleged again, without evidence, that Fox carried the flag at the direction of government officials. In essence, Freedom Corp alleges that before the convoy arrived in Ottawa, certain members of the political executive and their staff decided to paint protesters as racist and extremist, Rouleau said in the discretion. Freedom Corp continues that once the protesters in Ottawa began, the political executive and their staff furthered this labeling by pointing to Nazi photographs of Nazi and Confederate flags that had been circulating online. Miller also applied to call others before the commission to testify. David Chan, a freelance photographer who took pictures at the protest, Sean Folks, a man who says he spoke with Fox at the protest, and representatives of Enterprise Canada. In his decision dismissing the application, Rouleau said Miller did not have sufficient evidence for his allegations. Given the seriousness of the allegations, the commission would likely have to receive evidence from Enterprise Canada and those individuals targeted by Freedom Corp's allegations, Rouleau said in the decision. This would constitute a very significant distraction from the Commission's core mandate in light of absence of any further factual support. It is not prudent use of the Commission's remaining time to pursue Freedom Corp's theory. The Commission is tasked with examining the government's decision to evoke the Federal Emergencies Act. The government invoked the act to bring anti-vaccine mandate protests to an end, including massive protests which occupied downtown Ottawa for weeks last winter. As troublesome as Freedom Corp allegations might be, even if they had been supported by compelling evidence, the fact is that they would have little, if any, relevance to the key issue that the Commission must determine, Rouleau said. Miller also wanted the Ottawa Police Service and the Ottawa Provincial Police to provide evidence to the inquiry about a truck that has been seen displaying a Confederate flag at the protest. Rouleau also dismissed that application. Basis for seeking this information is purely speculative. However, having carefully reviewed the information provided by Freedom Corp, I conclude that this is in essence a phishing explanation or extension, Rouleau said in his decision. Jason Leitier, president of Enterprise Canada, told CBC's Power and Politics Tuesday that Fox was in Toronto at the time in the protest and that Fox had been receiving death threats since Miller made his allegation. This is the last week of the commission will be hearing from witnesses. The commission is expected to deliver a final report to Parliament by February 20th, 2023. So we have to wait and see what's coming out of there. Justice Minister David Lametti told today defended his government's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act to deal with anti-public health measure protests last winter, but wouldn't expand on the legal option in the government received, citing solicitor-client privileges. That caused some frustration among the lawyers appearing before the Public Order Emergencies Commission, including inquiry, including one representative or one representing the commission itself. Commission counsel are in a conundrum here, said lawyer Gordon Cameron, close to the end of Lametti's testimony before the inquiry. Cameron said the commission's lawyers have been attempted to find a way to lift the veil that has made such a black box of what has turned out to be a central issue before the hearing. We just regret that it would end up being an absence of transparency on the part of the government in this process. The inquiry is investigating the government's decision to deploy special emergency powers to deal with the protests, the legal interpretation, and the never before used Emergencies Act has become a key point as the Commission works to determine whether the federal government was justified in invoking the law. Before Lamidty's testimony got underway, a lawyer from the federal government informed the inquiry that it won't be waiving solicitor client privileges, the legal principle that protests communication between lawyers and their clients. Well, I want to put on the record that the government of Canada continues to arrest and maintain all of the claims of the solicitor-client privilege in respect to all legal advice and opinions. Andrea Donsavilles said, "We will be objecting to and Minister Lamidty's Minister Lametti will be refusing to answer all questions that would derive into areas of solicitor-client privilege." Gone Slaves urged the lawyers to tailor their questions during cross-examination to avoid objections. Okay, well, it would be an interesting maneuver, said Commissioner Paul Raoult. That didn't stop lawyers from trying to get Lametti to react to comments Canadian Security Intelligence Service Director David Vignelant made earlier this week. Vigilant said that while didn't believe the self-styled Freedom Convoy constituted a threat to national security as deemed by the CSIS Act, he did support invoking the Emergencies Act. The top intelligence officer testified he sought a legal interpretation from the Department of Justice, and that it was his understanding that the Emergencies Act definition of a threat to the security of Canada was broader than the one in the Act of CSIS. Under the Emergencies Act, the federal cabinet must have reasonable grounds to believe a public order emergency exists, which the Act defines as one that arises from threats to the security of Canada that are so serious as to be in a national emergency. The Act then points back to CSIS's decision of such a threat, which cites serious violence against people or property for the purpose of achieving a political, religious, or ideological objective, espionage, foreign interference, or the intent to overthrow the government by violence. Quote, "You didn't personally believe that Section 2 of the CSIS Act was any different in the Emergencies Act, did you?" Brendan Miller, a lawyer representing some of the convoy organizers, told Lametti during questioning today. quote, "You're asking me to give legal advice," Lametti replied. "You're asking for advice that I might have given to the governor in the council." Lametti spoke to the spoke to commission lawyers in September. He again invoked solicitor-client privilege during that conversation. He did tell them that, in his view, the two laws did not interact in any way that would have effectively provided a single nation security agency with a veto on the decision to invoke a public order emergency. A summary of that conversation was entered into evidence Wednesday. Quote, "He emphasized that the cabinet was working with imperfect information, that threats may or may not have materialized, and that it had a responsibility to factor in these gaps in information," said the interview summary. Lametti concluded that it was the government's responsibility to determine whether a threat to the security of Canada existed. He emphasized his view that cabinet made the right decision. Cameron said that given the inquiry's tight timeline, Raulu's final report is due to Parliament in February. Commission Council won't be challenging solicitor-client privilege because it could end up in court. Quote, "Now, if we believed that prevented you from accessing the basis on which the government came to its conclusion, we would ask you for a ruling on it. But we are confident that there are other ways we can get the same information on the record, or get the same result through legal action," he said, addressing Raulu. Lametti said his office began to look into the Emergencies Act around January 30th, soon after convoy trucks first rolled into Ottawa and parked near Parliament Hill. He testified that he wanted the Department of Justice to be prepared. Quote, "I knew that we had to begin thinking about whether or not it was going to even be an option," Lametti said. Quote, "This is the worst scenario would be something explodes, and we were not ready to use it because we hadn't done the kinds of consultations necessary, or asked the appropriate questions to the appropriate people in order to get it done. So this is me being prudent." Messages entered into evidence Wednesday showed Lametti and Public Safety Minister Marcio and Encino discussed how to clear the anti-COVID-19 protests. Sometimes joked about it. Lametti today described the texts as banter with a colleague and friend. There will be no occasional attempts at bad humor, he said. On February 12th, Lametti wrote to Edencio that you need to get the police to move. And the CAF, if necessary, he added. Too many people are being seriously are being seriously adversarially impacted by what is an occupation. I'm getting out as soon as I can. People are looking to us / you for leadership, and not stupid people before, like, Canary Cath, my team. The text entered into evidence did not give full names. How many tanks are you asking for? Mardinsino wrote back. I just want to ask how many we've got on hand. I reckon one will do, Lametti texted back. During cross-examination, Lametti said he wasn't calling for deployment of the Canadian Armed Forces. Quote, this is meant to be a joke among two friends, he said. Another set of texts with Medicinal showed Lametti offering harsh words for then Ottawa Police Chief Peter Soley. On February 4th, Medicinal texted that police have the authority to enforce the law on protesters. Quote, they just need to exercise it and do their job, texted Medicinal. I was stunned by the lack of a multi-layered plan, responded Lametti. Solely is incompetent. Lametti testified Wednesday that at the time he had to move out of his Ottawa residence and was worried about his staffers getting harassed by protesters. I was frustrated, I have to admit it, he said. It is frank. Lametti said he'd softened the language towards the former chief with the benefit of hindsight. On February 23rd, Liberal MP Greg Fergus, who represents an Ottawa around riding, texted Lametti about the decision to revoke the Emergencies Act. Quote, but would it have been more appropriate if we waited until Friday? 44 hours after vote seems unseemingly. Fergus texted referring to the votes of the House and Commons, which saw the majority of MPs vote to deploy the Emergencies Act. The Senate was in the midst of debating the act, but withdrew the motion shortly after Trudeau announced the decision to revoke the act. Quote, no, we needed to stay ahead of the NDP and senators. The NDP and senators were saying that they would vote against based of their views that there was no longer an emergency, Lametti wrote back. Defense Minister Anit Anand also took questions Wednesday. She testified that she was convinced the military was not an appropriate tool to use in the response to the protest. Well, our country's soldiers are not police officers, she said. They are not trained in crowd control, and they are not trained to protest management. I mean, to be fair though, are the fucking police as well? I mean, comparatively to like American police, yes. But no, they're still dog shit. During his time in front of the communication or the commission, Transport Minister Omar Oh, what? Algebra was asked about the government's decision to recite that Canadian cross-border essential workers, including truckers, show proof of vaccination at a point of entry. The protests that paralyzed parts of downtown Ottawa and blocked border crossings last winter started as a movement opposed that mandate before turning into a larger protest against pandemic public health measures and the Liberal government. Tim Kahir, a lawyer for the Justice Center of Constitutional Freedoms, asked if the federal government considered repealing the mandate in the face of the protests. Ali Gabra said the government made decisions during the pandemic based on what it believed would protect Canadians. Quote, so the government should never change its policies in response to outcry from protesters, Kalir asked. Quote, now if you're asking me, should the government change its policies because people break the law in expressing their opinions, I'd say no, he said. Should the government listen to the public to consider the sentiment of the public? Of course. The day started with a presentation on what the commission had heard from the public. More than 9,000 Canadians wrote to the inquiry to share their often divergent views with the protest. Swear. The Public Order Emergencies Commission, examining the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act to end last winter's Freedom Convoy protests, began Wednesday with a presentation on the public feedback received. As part of the inquiry, the Commission sought feedback as Canadians between August 18th and October 31st. The Commission asked members of the public to share their experiences, views, and observations around the circumstances that led to the invocation of the Emergencies Act, as well as the measures taken to deal with the emergency situation. As a result, the Commission received nearly 9,500 written submissions from a broad spectrum of Canadians. Here's the highlights from the feedback as it was presented by anonymized by the Commission Council. I made the informed decision to not obtain a COVID vaccine. Due to that choice, I endured months of prosecution, intimidation, and segregation. It seemed like there was no end to how far the government would go to force vaccines upon people, and I worry about the future. We even considered fleeing the country. Finally, there was a glimmer of hope that came with the rise of the Freedom Convoy, a member of the public. I have never felt so proud to be a Canadian in my life, protester. My experience with fellow citizens during that time was unlike anything I have ever experienced. Other bound Other bound was the love we had for Canada and true democracy. We simply ask to have a conversation with our Prime Minister. No violence, no malicious intent to anyone. I was moved by the kindness and respect displayed by these fellow Canadians, protester. Yeah, okay, bro. Bunch of fucking hogs. There was a park trucked at Bank and Lucier Street. I was roughly 6 feet from the side of the truck wearing a mask when he advocated the train horn. I clearly remember the pain I felt inside my skull. I temporarily lost my vision. This may be the precise blast which caused the severe tinnitus. Community member. I have participated in many protests. I also have lived through dozens of Ottawa protests that I was not involved in. Some I support, some I oppose. I appreciate that at the time there is mischief and public disobedience, but I never have seen or experienced so many people commit crimes and endanger others for their political opinion. Community member. True. I'm a 65-year-old retired high school teacher who relies on my volunteering shifts at the museum to remain active, both physically and mentally. The prolonged COVID shutdown at the museum was difficult for me, and the ensuing protest exacerbated the personal impact. Community member. The point which I found most egregious was the Canadian government never did communicate directly with the protesters. Even other protest groups of any scale has had some form of direct communication publicly displayed attempt to show good faith on behalf of the Canadian government. These groups, such as Indigenous encampment, women's rights, and BLM, then disappeared, having been heard. This opportunity for a peaceful resolution was never presented by the government as a bystander. It was if the Canadian government was provoking a fight for self-serving reasons. The member of the public. I don't know about that one, because the government deploys fucking cops to do really bad fucking things to like especially Indigenous protests. Like, goddamn. Seeing elected officials use this disgrace as a means to build political credit was atrocious. I feel abandoned by all levels of government and by the police, and have not regained that trust. The Premier of Ontario only took action when Toyota and GM raised concerns about the blockade at the US border. I work in automotive manufacturing, and my plant was directly affected by this blockade. Delays in delivery of auto parts or even empty bins came even close to shutting us down. At least the border blockade was eventually lifted before that became a reality. What was more serious was the total failure of the provincial government to deal with the blockade in Ottawa. This should have been handled entirely by the by the province, but instead it was cravenly handed off to the federal government, which should not be responsible for it. Completely agree. But, you know, Doug Ford literally did nothing. When the Emergencies Act was invoked and passed into the House of Commons, I was overwhelmed with fear. Would my bank account be frozen because I had shared videos of the convoy on my social media? I went to the bank and emptied my account. Would I be arrested for attending the convoy in Ottawa? I decided not to wait and see. I fled Canada. What happened at the convoy and the Emergencies Act being invoked has changed forever the way I see Canada. This country does not feel like home anymore. I am always living in fear of retribution of my not supporting the Trudeau government. When they invoked the Emergencies Act, they showed that no law, constitutional, or no constitution or charter is above them. The law offers me no protection. I mean, dog, you were literally fucking doing crazy shit. The Emergencies Act brought forth by the government of Canada was not needed. The government was wrongly impeachment the Emergencies Act. I and many others around me no longer trust the federal government in anything they say or do. It was changing. It has changed my thinking towards government. They have lost my trust in them, and it may take years to reestablish that trust. We felt on the edge of sanity until the Emergencies Act finally came in, and suddenly things happened. Our police would not have ended it so quick, or ended this as quick. We kept hoping the federal government would enact that step, because this protest should never, ever, ever have gotten away with the outright lawlessness and disregard for fellow citizens. This lack of action has forever changed our country for the worse, shaken our confidence. The Emergencies Act was an absolute necessary. We should also believe it was ended quickly, showing there was no intent to abuse power. It was the reason we finally got some relief. I came to Canada as an immigrant and am now a Canadian citizen. I always very proud to see the Canadian flag flying anywhere in the country or the world. Now when I see it on the back of trucks, I shudder. Quite frankly, it reminds me of the black flags flying on Taliban trucks. Even when the flag is simply flying over an official office, it gives me an unpleasant feeling. It has ruined my enjoyment of such a simple symbol of Canada. I want my Canadian flag back. There is now a strain on the reputation of Canada as a peaceful, welcoming, law-abiding nation. The government lost a great deal of respect, not only in Canada, but also around the world. It's just claims and shit. All right.
Our government has been guided by a position and a belief that children need to be in the classroom, that they belong in the classroom. After 2 very difficult years of pandemic disruption, we know that there's no better place for a child in front of their educator with their friends. They've been through so much mental, physical impacts as well as academic regression. And so
What?
the government said we would do everything humanly possible. Our premier made a commitment to do everything humanly possible.
The funny thing is that he didn't, though.
To keep kids in class. And today I'm proud to confirm that the parties have come together to reach a tentative agreement that will provide stability for children, keep kids in the classroom for 2 million children who will be learning tomorrow. This is a positive outcome for all the parties. But the biggest beneficiary of this deal is our kids who are going to have some stability and be able to stay in school with the full benefits of extracurriculars and clubs and sports, the educational benefits, the tutoring. All this will be provided to our children tomorrow and every day as we aim to get to keep them in school. So this is a positive outcome. We are grateful to all the parties for working with the government. We've been very clear in what will guide us every day. Kids deserve to be in class, and I'm proud to confirm they will be tomorrow.
Minister, the union was demanding more services, an ECE in every kindergarten class. Did the government agree to that?
So while the deal is before ratification, I do need to respect that process. But what I can confirm is all parties, the government, union, trustees, all of us leave this tentative agreement with positive outcomes for what we were trying to advance. I think all parties have been able to receive some incremental wins. The greatest beneficiary of this deal is our kids who are going to be in school. That's what matters. This is not about unions winning or government winning. It's about our kids. And they're going to be in class. They're going to be learning in class tomorrow where, frankly, they always should have been. And so I think this is a material win for working parents. They've been very incredibly patient. And I know this has been a very anxious process, but I'm happy we could provide some certainty to you that these kids are going to stay in school, that they're going to learn in school. And it is
Yeah, the only reason why is because you don't want them going on strike again. You're fucking afraid of them going on strike again.
our aim to keep them there right to June.
Because here's the thing, like, CUPE threatening to go on strike again, like, even after, like, the money issue was resolved, is inherently for the children of Ontario. Like, they want, like, if it was up to, like, Doug Ford's government, they wouldn't, they would only have, like, an EA in kindergarten and shit. So CUPE pushing for better working conditions for them is not necessarily a bad thing for your kids either. It's a very good thing that they're pushing for that as well, because I mean, your kids deserve better too.
Did it have to come to this? I spoke with a lot of anxious parents today who said they've had enough of this uncertainty. Did it have to come to this?
You know, I think it's important that we provided a deal that keeps kids in class. I think it's been critical from day one that these kids never left the classroom. I've been very clear. I believe children deserve, they have a right to be in class. Nothing should matter more. And so I think it is important that we focus, you know, really on the positive outcome, which is the kids are going to be in class. They're going to have stability. They're going to have the supports that they deserve, and that they're going to be learning in front of their educator, which I believe is so important.
Yeah,
So,
only
you know,
now, after the CUPE
I know
threats.
this has been a long road for so many families, but I think the most important outcome we could achieve today is some stability for the working parents, for the kids and the staff, all of whom are going to be learning and working tomorrow. And this is a great outcome for kids. Appreciating it's been a long road, but I'm very grateful that the parties came together to keep kids in the classroom.
But Minister, how long will that stability last? You have other unions that will be asking for potentially more now that they've seen all that was offered to one of the unions as part of the public education system.
Yep.
Can you say that this stability will last? What if the government?
We'll have to wait and see.
They said that Doug Ford blinked. That's how they put it. But what happens the next time?
We're going to stay at the table. We're never going to leave the table. We're going to continue to make the case kids deserve to be in class.
You guys have left a lot.
Kids, not ourselves. We've got to put them first, and this government has demonstrated reasonableness. We've demonstrated we're going to focus on children, on their mental, physical, and academic success, and we put them first every step of the way, which is why we're able to deliver a deal in partnership with our other parties that will provide some stability to children in Ontario. And I think what we're signaling to everyone is a resolute commitment to to keep these kids in the classroom because there's no reason why these kids should be home.
Oh, we have to watch it at some point.
Yes, Farah, a potential crisis has been averted here in Ontario with a last-second deal that will keep teachers in the classroom. The Santa Claus parade ran by here earlier today with thousands of parents and their kids lining the streets, gritting their teeth, possibly because of the cold, but also the uncertainty over the fact that there is a potential for 55,000 school teachers in this province to go on strike. There was a 5 p.m. deadline set by the union to get a deal, and it went right down to the wire. The sticking points were money. The province had agreed to 15% pay raise over 4 years, and the other issue was workers, which the province balked at, hiring more assistants, more ECEs, more janitors, more secretaries. We're unsure if that is in the new deal. But for now, we can tell you
It wasn't. That's why they were
deal has been reached and
threatening on strike again.
hopefully ending this contentious and nasty, bitter fight. One last point, though. Today, CUPE did link to the PC website. It's Premier Doug Ford's birthday, his 58th birthday today, and they suggested that its members send him birthday wishes. He might not want to look at those too closely. Farah, back to you.
Mike Drolet in Toronto. Thank you, Mike. Well, kids in Ontario are going to be back in classrooms very shortly this morning. A strike was narrowly averted last night with the province and the union that represents 55,000 education support workers reaching a tentative agreement. The union is not happy with the deal overall.
This is a positive outcome for all the parties, but the biggest beneficiary of this deal is our kids.
Listen, as a mom, I don't like this deal. As a worker, I don't like this deal. As the president of the OSBCU, I understand why this is the deal that's on the table. I think it falls short. I think it's terrible that we live in a world that doesn't see the need to provide services to kids that they need.
The two sides did find agreement on wages, but the union says there's no new help in terms of services and guaranteed staffing levels. The tentative agreement now goes to a ratification vote later this week. And Megan Fitzpatrick is on the story. She's outside a school in Toronto to bring us the very latest on that tentative deal. Megan, good morning.
Good morning, Heather. Well, the union had given the required 5-day strike notice earlier last week, saying they would walk off the job today if a deal wasn't reached by 5 p.m. last night. And then we heard shortly after that that a tentative agreement had been reached. And there were sort of two areas that the union said they were fighting for improvements in. One was wages, and they did say last week they had come to some, quote, common ground on wages, securing a $1 an hour raise every year for the duration of the contract. Laura Walton, the head of the union, saying that still falls far short of what these workers deserve. But they said they were also fighting for these student services, they said, which meant
also true.
hiring thousands more staff. They wanted more custodians and librarians. They wanted an early childhood educator in every kindergarten classroom in Ontario.
Which should
be.
be.
They did not get that, but Walton's saying they will keep fighting for that. And she had this message for parents. Take a listen.
That fight does not end with one setback. We will keep representing your needs, and we will keep fighting for you and with you. We will keep pushing for the type of supportive, safe, and enriching schools and classes that all children deserve. We do not take your solidarity for granted.
And she did make it very clear, Heather, she does not like this deal, but nonetheless, they are going to bring this tentative agreement to the members for a vote. She was saying essentially the government was making it clear they would not budge. They were not willing to make any investments or improvements, and that this was the deal they were going to get. And so now it's up to the members. Lecce, meanwhile, the education minister, Stephen Lecce, saying he's proud of this deal, that a tentative agreement was reached and that kids will be in class today.
What's going to happen next on this then, Megan?
Well, they do expect that ratification vote to start later in the week, and that could take a couple of days for all the members to vote on whether they accept this contract or not. If they don't, negotiations would have to resume and they would have to stay at the bargaining table. Parents should just know, Heather, they do have to give 5 days notice of any job action, so they can't just trigger it overnight. Parents would get some warning of any job action. But the other thing to keep in mind, here we're talking about education workers, not teachers. Teachers are represented by other unions, and they are also in the middle of contract talks with the government. So Lecce has been saying that this agreement last night means stability for kids and families in this province, but he was asked when he spoke to reporters last night, can you really guarantee that, given you still have negotiations going on with other unions, and if those don't go well, might there be some job action by those other unions? Here's a bit of what Lecce said.
There very well could be.
We're going to stay at the table. We're never going to leave the table. We're going to continue to make the case kids deserve to be in class. This has to be about our kids, not ourselves. We've got to put them first, and this government has demonstrated reasonableness.
Except you haven't, though, bro.
Focus on
like what?
On their mental, physical, and academic success, and we put them first every step of the way, which is why we're able to deliver a deal in partnership with the other parties that will provide some stability to children in Ontario.
Now, those other unions, Heather, are at different stages of their negotiations, but it certainly has been a roller coaster for parents in this province. I'm sure they're breathing a sigh of relief this morning that their kids will be in class. Again, it's not the teachers that would have been going on strike, but school boards in the province had said they couldn't keep schools open if these 55,000 education workers weren't at work. We'll hopefully be speaking to some parents this morning to get their reaction to all of this news.
Looking forward to hearing what they have to say about all of this. Thank you very much, Megan Fitzpatrick, live in Toronto.
Okay. The Canadian Union of Public Employees is now asking thousands of education workers in Ontario to accept a tentative contract offer from the Ford government on contradicting earlier comments from the key member of the bargaining team. When the union agreed to accept a 4-year contract offered from the Ford government on November 20th, nearly averting a planned strike that would have closed schools province-wide. The bargaining committee signaled its uneasy with the deal. I do not like this deal, said Lauren Walton with the Ontario School Board Council of Unions, which represents 55,000 custodians, librarians, and early childhood educators and secretarial staff. As a mom, I don't like this deal. As a worker, I do not like this deal. As the president of the OSBCU, I understand why this deal that's on the I understand why this is the deal that's on the table. I think it falls short, and I think it's terrible that we live in a world that doesn't see the need to provide services for kids that they need. The TENPID endorsement of the contract by Walton led to internal union concern about whether the members would accept or reject the offer during a nearly 2-week ratification vote. The results of which would be revealed or unraveled on unraveled, on December 6th, the union said. On Tuesday, however, CUPE National President Mark Hancock appealed to members to vote in favor of the tentative contract, saying the bargaining committee secured all that it could be secured. The OSBCU bargaining committee was at the table to achieve a breakthrough wage settlement after more than a decade of legislated wage resentment, Hancock said in a memo to members. No deal contains all we seek. With Education Minister Stephen Lecce, Education Minister Stephen Lecce said the contract resulted in incremental gains for both sides. The government sources told Global News the deal was the same offer presented to the union before it announced a 5-day strike on November 18th. CUPE, which calls this one the roughest rounds of negotiations in the country, said the deal would give members a $1 per hour wage increase, netting the lowest earners a 16.8% increase when compounded over 4 years. Well, you were not able to achieve all that you sought this round, namely funding for additional much-needed services. We recommend apprentice with this tentative agreement alongside your bargaining committee, Hancock said. Earlier in the month, CUPE workers staged a 2-day strike after the province briefly introduced legislation that outlawed their labor action and imposed the contract on CUPE workers. That legislation was repealed by the Ford government and offer it made in exchange for CUPE ending its strike action.
Even in a community well practiced in mourning, the search for comfort is so difficult. Familiar anthems bring some relief as the acts of violence and heroism inside Club Q come to light.
I just know I got into mode and I needed to save my family. I told her, kick this guy.
Army veteran Richard Fierro followed his gut. Without thinking, he tackled the gunman with the help of a stranger.
And then I started wailing on this dude. And I'm on top of him. I'm a big dude, man, and this guy was bigger. And I just kept wailing on him. And I told the kid in front of me, kick him in his head, keep kicking him in his head.
As he screamed for more help.
So, yeah, there was a shooting in Colorado at a gay bar called Q. Yeah, it's fucking disgusting, man. Like, I heard about this like yesterday, I think, and like it's fucking gross. Like, what the fuck keeps like why the fuck does this keep happening, America? Like, Jesus. You guys have 2 mass shootings within a week.
A witness says a transgender woman in heels stomped on the gunman's face. No more shots were fired. Fierro has told his story in multiple interviews.
I told the kid in front of me,
reliving those moments and his own grief.
I lost my kid's boyfriend. I tried to have everybody in there. I still feel bad that there's 5 people.
And bro,
there's 5 people that didn't come home. And this guy, I told him while I was hitting him, I said, I'm gonna kill you, man, because you tried to kill my friends.
Raymond Green Vance was only 22 years old. One of the 5 victims killed in the rampage, 19 others were hurt. The suspect, 22-year-old Anderson Lee Ulrich, was known to authorities. This video shows him surrendering to police last year after threatening his mom, though no charges were laid. In this case, he is expected to...
Come on, bro. That's hella red flag. That's a hella red flag, bro. Bro, what the fuck happens in America? Like, why can't you guys just recognize the fucking red flags that someone's gonna be like a mass shooter?
face charges for murder and bias-motivated crimes.
Threats against
The head of the world's largest LGBTQ advocacy group says hate crimes have spiked, particularly threats against drag artists.
And it's
Well, not only that, you have Republicans in America also like trying to ban like drag shows and shit and making them illegal, which is fucking wild. Like, what? Why? They're not fucking hurting anyone. Like, no one's fucking trying to trans your kid by taking them to a drag show. Like, that just doesn't happen.
It's being driven by this rhetoric from these politicians like Lauren Boebert or Ron DeSantis, who are using us to demonize our community.
Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert accused the first ever transgender cabinet secretary.
The assessments Secretary for Health is out here trying to empower children to become transgender. The word is groom, Richard, not empower. You're grooming them, not empowering them. What the fuck? Wait, what? No. Bro, why the fuck can't she just be normal?
Of grooming children.
The Democrats.
And the funny thing is that, like, bro, like, Republicans fucking groom children all the goddamn time and, like, are very into, like child beauty pageants and shit.
Are the party of pedophiles.
This rhetoric is
yeah, totally. Despite the fact that there wasn't there like one politician in or one guy running for the Senate in, was it the House or was it the Senate in America, who was like jerking off outside of like a preschool? Yeah, totally. The Dems are pedophiles.
Common in certain extreme right-wing circles. It's left a community on edge. A moment that reminds some advocates of the fear they experienced decades ago.
I didn't do all this work for 50 years so that my kids and my grandkids have to have that same fear.
And Katie, the suspect obviously injured, but tonight I gather he's at a hospital.
Yes, and that means he'll make his first court appearance by video link tomorrow. And it could actually take up to 10 days before charges are formally laid. What evidence authorities have on the suspect about his past and possible motivation, they're not saying for now. We are, though, hearing from survivors, the injured. One man who says he will return to Club Q if and when it opens. A second who said it's going to be a very long time before he's comfortable going anywhere in public again. Adrian.
Bro, how the fuck does this shit keep happening? Like, you guys hear about these fucking red flags and shit and don't do anything about it. And then tragedies like this happen. Like, it's just fucking wild to me.
Now so grotesquely familiar to so many Americans. Sorrow after yet another mass killing. This time, it happened just before midnight at a gay and lesbian nightclub about an hour south of Denver. Authorities aren't yet calling it a hate crime, but that's the strong suspicion. Inside the club, a man opened fire with what's described as a powerful long rifle in a place the LGBTQ community had considered a safe haven.
As I was dancing on the dance floor, I heard shots fired. All I can think about is everything, my life. Just everything, friends, family, loved ones.
What I can't stop thinking about is the visuals of the evening, of the bodies, of the blood, of the broken glass, of the carnage and the wreckage.
We are actively...
Like, come on, bro. Like, this is just clear homophobia. And like, it's... Like, there is motive there, for sure. And if, he gets all fucking scot-free and shit, like, like, it's pathetic that this shit happens. Like, you guys, America needs to do better.
Processing the scene at Club Q.
Police say club patrons prevented this from being much worse, confronting the shooter and holding him down until police arrived and arrested him. As they now try to learn more, including a motive, police can hardly find words
He's a homophobe.
to describe what happened.
I'm so terribly saddened and heartbroken.
For many Americans, it echoes the horrific mass killing at the Pulse nightclub in Florida in 2016.
Yeah, I was gonna say that reminds me a lot of that one shooting in Florida, which was fucking wild.
That left 49 dead and 53 others injured.
Like the sad thing about this is that like five comparatively or like 5 people dead in America, like an American mass shooting is a low number, which is really sad.
This one comes as threats and violence targeting the LGBTQ community in America have lately ticked up. Said U.S. President Joe Biden, the U.S. cannot and must not tolerate hate. But even as the country now deals with this latest mass killing, history here underlines there will be more. Paul Hunter, CBC.
The memorials and vigils continue in the United States in honor of the victims of Saturday's nightclub shooting in Colorado Springs. Now, this is the scene at the Denver City and County building right across from the state capitol, all lit up in the colors of pride, the rainbow of pride. 5 people were killed.
I love how like whenever like there's a mass shooting within America, the Dems will just like fucking do this shit, like posturing and everything, and will not like engage in like radical or like not even radical, but like very moderate reforms to like say gun legislation, mental health, you know, that kind of shit. And then like it's so fucking annoying. And I would imagine like it's would be very frustrating with like a vast majority of Americans too, considering that a lot of legislation, like say better gun control and better access to mental health services and red flag laws and everything would be really good for or really popular within America. I think like 70 to 80% of Americans support it.
17 injured at the LGBTQ club on Saturday. The suspect, Anderson Lee Aldrich, currently being held on preliminary murder charges and the charges of committing a hate crime. Those could change. Prosecutors have not yet filed in court. The U.S. Attorney for the District of Colorado says it's still too early to say whether federal hate crime charges might also be laid. The number of victims would likely have been higher had it not been for the interventions of 2 people. Natalie Collada with further detail. I mean, we looked at this yesterday a bit, but we're really hearing about what happened in that club and the heroism that led to the attack ending when it did, Natalie.
And Heather, hearing from those 2 or one of those 2 individuals who really took action when that gunman walked into the club on Saturday night, the 2 individuals who were able to subdue him before police arrived. And really that's within minutes, because it was within 5 minutes, police were there right away to try and pin this man down. They are the 2 individuals, Thomas James and Richard Fierro. Now, Fierro is a former military veteran, a major in the military. He was deployed in Afghanistan, in Iraq. He said his training really kind of took over when the attack began, and he jumped into action, instinct taken over. He took one of the assailants' guns away. He described it a little bit more. Have a listen to what he had to say.
Listen, I'm not a hero. There's real heroes out there, right? I hit him with the gun, his gun, not mine. I don't have no gun. See?
I mean, he is a hero. Let's be real. He helped prevent a tragedy becoming even worse.
I grabbed it and I hit him with it. I kept hitting him with it. That cop walked in. When he saw me, he must have thought I was crazy.
Now, Fierro really kind of dismissed being called a hero when he was in some of these interviews, Heather. However, his actions, according to Colorado Springs police, were considered heroic because it said it's quite likely had he not intervened, more people could have died, could have been injured. As we know, 5 people were killed, 17 were injured, 13 of those, Heather, still in hospital as of yesterday.
And as for those who were killed, Natalie, 5 people died in that club shooting, and their stories are beginning to emerge as well.
Yeah, we are learning more about those individuals. I can take you through some of them that we know. Raymond Green Vance was actually the boyfriend of Fierro's daughter. They were all there watching the drag performance that was going on in the club at that night. It was his first time in the club. Kelly Loving, another individual who was killed. Daniel Aston, a transgendered bartender, also a performer in the shows at the club. Derek Rump, another individual, a bartender who really found community at this club because it is, of course, as we know, one of the only LGBTQ bars in Colorado Springs. And Ashley Pla, a mother who worked very much for a nonprofit organization to help foster children find homes. She would also deliver Christmas trees to those homes to sort of lift people's spirits during the holiday seasons. The community is shocked. So are friends and family, as you can imagine, who knew these individuals, including one man who we're going to bring you in here, Jimmy Gomez-Bish. He worked at the club. He knew 2 of the individuals that were killed. Here's a little bit more about what he had to say about them.
Daniel had a big heart, and Derek had a big heart, and there's so many words that can describe him. I'm hurting deep inside. I've lost 2 good friends. Being at that bar, they became family, and I'm gonna miss them so much.
Bro, this is so sad. It's really sad.
Very much emotions, as you can imagine. There have been other tributes posted by the family and friends of those who were killed, expressing a little bit more about who those individuals were, that they were loved, and that they are, of course, grieving, as is many in the LGBT community, as well as the entire state, Heather, as people continue to grapple with what happened on the weekend.
Natalie, thank you very much, tracking developments in the investigation and in the impact for us today.
The deadly shootings happened just before midnight at the Club CUPE. Patrons desperately tried to escape as the lone gunman, carrying a long rifle, opened fire.
It was so scary. I heard shots, broken glass, bodies.
Bartender Michael Anderson
So
thought he
hard.
was going to die.
What I can't stop thinking about is the visuals of the evening of the bodies, of the blood, and seeing a safe place turned into a war zone.
Police arrived quickly and apprehended the suspect in just over 5 minutes after the first emergency call. They say the suspect, 22-year-old Anderson Lee Aldrich, entered the club and immediately began shooting, but patrons risked their own lives to stop him.
At least 2 heroic people inside the club confronted and fought with the suspect, and were able to stop the suspect from continuing to kill.
The FBI has joined the investigation. The shooter's motive hasn't been determined, but investigators are looking into whether this was a hate crime. Prosecutors are promising justice will be served.
Actions taken to strike fear in specific communities will not be tolerated in our community.
Colorado has been the site of some of America's most notorious mass shootings, including Columbine High School in 1999, an Aurora movie theater in 2012, and a Boulder grocery store last year. This city has had its share of mass violence, too.
Colorado Springs is once again in mourning. Our hearts go out to the victims and their families who are bearing the weight of this horrific tragedy.
For the LGBTQ community, this tragic event brings back nightmares of the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016 that left 49 clubgoers dead. The Club Q massacre was America's 6th mass shooting in November alone.
What? 6 in November? What the fuck? How does that happen?
Another city trying to make sense of such a senseless act. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
All right. So yeah, there was another mass shooting today, I think, in Virginia that left said 6 people dead.
People are dead, others are wounded after a shooting at a Virginia Walmart. Officers say they received reports of a shooting at 10 p.m. local time Tuesday night. This is in the city of Chesapeake. They arrived to find multiple fatalities. Investigators say a man believed to be the store manager opened fire and then turned the gun on himself. It's unclear how many people have died, though police say it could be up to 10. Investigators are expected to provide an update later this morning.
Thank you for coming out this morning. This is going to be our press update for the mass shooting that occurred at the Walmart last night on North Battlefield Boulevard.
6 victims have died. 4 victims are in area hospitals with conditions unknown at this time.
Excuse me.
And the suspect is dead from what we believe was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The Chesapeake Police SWAT team executed a search warrant at the suspect's residence, and with the help of the Virginia State Police, we cleared the house. We have reason to believe that there's no risk to the public at this time. Again,
What?
while this investigation is ongoing, I'll go ahead and take a few questions now.
Sir, do you know the identity of the shooter? Can you tell us?
We cannot tell you the identity of the shooter because his next of kin has not been notified.
Yes, sir, over here.
There have been a lot of reports that the shooter was an employee of the Walmart. Can you confirm that?
Yes, we can confirm that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, sir. I didn't hear what he said.
He wanted to know, was the shooter an employee of Walmart, and we were able to confirm that.
Was the shooter in a management position, supervisor?
I can't confirm that. You'd have to check with Walmart to be sure.
Are you able to tell us what type of weapon was used, sir?
A pistol is all we were able to say at this time.
Ms. Miller, did you have a question?
Can you confirm, or do you know if these attacks were targeted against any specific employees, or if this individual was shooting at random?
We don't know at this time. The investigation's still ongoing, so there's no clear motive at this time.
Mr. Hall.
What are the, do we know if the victims are also all employees?
We can't confirm that at this time.
Just avoided like every single fucking question. Like, what the fuck? Okay, let's move on to other news. Elizabeth May is now reinstated as the chairman for the Green Party. So let's take a look.
The once and future leader of the Green Party, Elizabeth May.
Canada's Greens, turning to the past to try and find their future. Former leader Elizabeth May making a comeback at age 68.
We're fighting for our grandchildren. We don't give up. We don't take breaks. We work till we ensure that the planet is secure.
May's election may look like deja vu, but this party insider says change comes in different forms.
Sometimes it's stabilizing with something we're familiar, so that person can help us turn that leaf.
Since May stepped down in 2019, the Greens have been plagued by infighting, financial trouble, and sustained allegations of systemic discrimination. May ran as part
I mean, haven't they like had a lot of like fucking infighting just in general?
A two-person team, so did her opposition. Her running mate recognizes the challenges ahead.
We know that there's much to do to cultivate trust, to rebuild trust internally.
But those who had high hopes under former leader Annie Paul aren't optimistic.
I'm not going to be staying around in a ever sinking ship in order to battle for things that I think are very important.
The Greens are already in a tough spot, struggling for space in a crowded political field, according to this poll watcher.
Other parties, like the Liberals, like the New Democrats, have also taken ownership of the environment file, and that has made the Greens less of a factor than they might have been before.
May begs to differ.
When the Secretary General of the United Nations says the world is on a highway to climate hell, we're the only relevant party.
It is certainly the only federal political party that will attempt to lead with two leaders, if it can get the necessary approval from its members. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
I mean, like, to be perfectly honest, I'm very surprised that Elizabeth May lost her leadership to begin with. Like, it's just something you don't expect, or you wouldn't expect to happen, like, ever.
The once and future leader of the Green Party, Elizabeth May.
It's difficult to put into words what it means to take a stage as the next leader of the Green Party of Canada.
Again.
C'est un peu de déjà vu.
Well, déjà vu. That's how Elizabeth May characterized her return to the helm of the Green Party on Saturday night. But this time, she's not a solo act. May hopes to co-lead with former human rights activist Jonathan Pedno. They will share.
I think he's the one that
help revitalize the struggling party. It's a question I spoke to Elizabeth May and.
Isn't he like the eco-socialist guy? I don't remember.
Jonathan Pedno about yesterday. Elizabeth May, I know your party likes to champion recycling, but I didn't know it went all the way to the top.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how exactly is this going to work with two leaders?
Take our ideas and they recycle them. No, co-leadership is not unfamiliar as a concept in the Green Party. The German Green co-leaders are now both in the cabinet in Germany, ditto New Zealand, ditto Scotland. It's a very commonly used form of leadership because it's distributed leadership, and it demonstrates that as Greens, and I know you've heard me say this a zillion times when I was leader, the leader of the Green Party is not the boss of the party. It's a role for service and for being the chief spokesperson. So we are
we're
the chief spokespersons.
Right. I think if the last year and a bit have taught us anything, the leader of the Green Party is not the boss. Because but Jonathan Pedno, I mean, how will this work? Because constitutionally, while this is common, you say with Greens in Germany or whatever, in your party it's not, right? There's room for one leader. You're now the deputy leader officially, and the party needs to change its entire constitution to make this work. So do you think the party will go for that?
Oh, I certainly do. We have had two couples of candidates running on a co-leadership ticket in this race. Members are excited. Members understand what co-leadership is about. We understand that the problems we face as a nation, but also as a party, require more heads around the table. But not only that, I mean, I'll say as a Quebecer, Québécois, the people in Quebec are very familiar with the concept of co-leaders because we have that with Québec Solidaire, and it works perfectly fine. They have been able to elect a good number of very good MLAs, and we intend to do just the same.
Okay, so you've won this race. You're committed to this plan. You think the party will get on board. There's an election, Ms. May, and there's a leaders' debate. Who shows up?
We've solved this too because the German Greens figured it out in the last election. For the first time, they put a candidate forward to be chancellor. Between the two of them, the two co-leaders decided, I think it should be Annalena Baerbock. Okay, now she's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Jonathan and I will, well before the writ period, decide which one of us we think is best positioned not to become leader, we'll still be co-leaders, but to take on a chief spokesperson role, just like Quebec Solidaire did recently in the Quebec election. We will be putting ourselves forward to the membership and say, we think, really, if it's 2025 and a lot more Canadians know Jonathan, and they think, yeah, Jonathan Pedno, you should take all the leaders' debates and all of the legal requirements of the Elections Act that say leader's signature, one leader. We will decide between the two of us, and we'll ask the membership to approve.
Right, okay, so Jonathan Pedno, the vote actually was for Elizabeth May on Saturday night, right?
It was for the two of us.
It's for the two of you, but the way the results were displayed was Elizabeth May was at top. I know the understanding was it for the both of you, but technically it was for Elizabeth May, but there is a chance that even though she got the most votes, that you could be the person in the leaders' debate in the next election.
Well, again, it was for the two of us. We ran on a joint ticket. We met with Canadians, with Greens, and presented a co-leadership model. We explained it thoroughly in our website, in all the interactions we had, and I think we can say with confidence that the votes that we got, mine and hers, were for one another.
Right. Yeah. So no matter what the ballot said, the understanding.
I mean, the Greens are like trying anything at this point because like literally nothing came from like Elizabeth when Elizabeth May was in charge, and the hell was her other? remember what the other. What's the other? What's her name? A. Anime Paul. That's what her name was. I couldn't remember what her name was.
Within the party, it was a ticket, and you're content with that.
And again, we'll go back to the membership.
Because like
We're not gonna
Anime
say,
Paul
"Guess
was
what, Surprise,
awful.
You voted for Elizabeth, but Jonathan's taking a leadership base." No, it's just that whenever the election will come, there'll be a mood in the country. You know what it's like. No one knows today what the country will be feeling like in 2025 as we get ready for an election. We will go, as the German Greens did, we'll go back to the membership and say, do you lay hands on this consensus decision that we have made? Otherwise, we'll switch it up. Everything about the Green Party of Canada has to rest in our members having the authorities.
Well, your members have had a busy year or two with the authorities, you know, with all of the turmoil around Anime Paul's leadership and the changes. There's some, you know, Jonathan Pedno, what do you need to do to sort of win back the confidence? Because the number of people who voted this time was way down from last time. You've taken a real hit in public opinion over the last couple of years. How do you rebuild all of this?
Well, the first thing is we start talking about the green policies and what brings us in politics. And what brings us in politics is the climate emergency, but also the failure by the Liberals who have been promising so much to Canadians, the sunny ways, and delivering very little. We are the party that...
I mean, that's just how the not the conservatives, the Liberals operate, though. It's not surprising in the slightest.
Consistently has been talking truth to Canadians, have been talking to Canadians as the adults that they are, and Elizabeth and I will be doing just that. Internally, we have work to do. We have our homeworks. We understand the challenges. We'll be having these discussions with our members, and we'll be attracting more members. We'll be expanding our base because we understand that there's a lot of Canadians out there who don't feel represented by status quo parties, and we are the answer to that.
You know, and we just finished a leadership race where all the candidates came up on stage together to declare our unity. I don't think you can find any other political party in this country, anytime the Liberal convention ended or the Conservatives ended a leadership race, where the team of candidates, well, who refer to ourselves as a team, the other candidates for leadership were great, and we want to keep working together and make sure they get elected to Parliament.
You don't think this will be confusing to voters, co-leaders, going back to the membership, figuring out who would actually be the candidate for Prime Minister, who would actually participate in debates?
We don't have a candidate for Prime Minister in this Westminster parliamentary democracy. You know we don't.
But I surmise from what you said, the person who goes into the debates is the person who becomes Prime Minister, assuming the Greens were to win it. Or what, you're not telling me that would change too, are you?
Well, a co-leadership model would actually suggest that we would continue as co-leaders in Parliament as well. It's a question for in the debates that you can't say, well, Jonathan will take all the French debates because he's a Quebecer, and I'll take the English debates because I'm Orator of the Year. No, we have to, during a writ period, single it down to one person.
Right.
In the unlikely future where we form a majority government, we would continue to share the leadership.
You don't think it's confusing?
Oh, no. I don't think it's confusing. I have the highest trust in Canadians' intelligence. We are an intelligent nation. People understand, and we've seen that in Quebec, that people don't get confused. We are a party. We have two leaders who speak with the same voice, have the same opinion, because we carry the membership's vision.
I mean, it definitely is going to be interesting to see how this pans out for them. Like, realistically, I don't think it will change all that much because the Green Party is too small of a party to like actually do anything anyways. So yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure.
Vision of what a green Canada looks like, and it's a beautiful vision, and we look forward to selling it.
And besides, I'm the 68-year-old angry grandmother. I'm fighting for my grandchildren's future. I've got a 32-year-old partner who's also fighting for the future of
and
youth.
Also angry.
And yes, that's true too. We're sick of what we're getting, of incremental policies that fail to deliver on the promises, and we're here.
I mean, the thing is that at least Trudeau has some form of plan comparative to the Conservatives. Like the Conservatives have absolutely no plan outside of like cutting carbon tax because it's hurting their wealthy donors.
To offer Canadians a real alternative.
Okay, so every time we ask for an interview, you both come in. Is that the deal from now on? Is that how it's going to work?
Well, probably not, because I'll be all over the country, and so will Elizabeth sometimes, but we're interchangeable.
Yes, and I'm more likely to show up because I work just over there.
That's true. Okay, all right. Well, it has its advantages. Elizabeth May, Jonathan Pedno, thanks for coming in.
Breaking news out of London this morning.
So yeah, Scotland tried to vote on independence, but they can't vote on independence without UK approval. I mean, I think if Scotland wants to be fucking independent, I say let them.
The UK Supreme Court has delivered a serious blow to the campaign for Scottish statehood.
The Scottish Parliament does not have the power to legislate for a referendum on
Yes.
Scottish independence.
So.
Yes, we do not want to have the Scottish people to be independent without our consent to His Majesty.
Scotland cannot hold a new independence referendum without approval from the British Parliament. Scotland has been pushing the semi-autonomous government there, pushing to hold a referendum again next October. A tight vote back in 2014, that led to a no vote and the country stayed within the UK, but there's been a push ever since. And let's bring in Ashley Burke, who's in London covering this. The reaction we're getting from Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish First Minister, this morning, what does she have to say?
Yeah, Heather, this decision by the UK's top court, it comes as a blow to Scotland's nationalists. Scottish voters rejected independence in the plebiscite back in 2014, but the Scottish government has argued that this should be revisited. And the Scottish National Party said that a lot has changed in the last 8 years, not least Brexit, which Scotland opposed.
That's also not including like the rise of the Scottish, is it the Scottish? I think it's the Scottish Republican movement as well. Like not American Republican movement, like the more progressive, like socialist aspect of the Republicans out in Scotland. I think it's in Scotland, right?
So Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon had this to say today about the decision.
Achieving independence is not now just desirable, it is essential if Scotland is to escape the disaster of Brexit, the damage of policies imposed by governments we do not vote for, and the low growth, high inequality economic model that is holding us back.
Scotland was like the first colony by the English.
Back.
Just wild to me.
Says that she's disappointed.
So yeah, like the English have been doing it for a while.
The ruling, but that she respects it and she has little choice. The only way for a legal referendum to happen now is if Sturgeon convinces the Prime Minister to agree to it.
I mean,
it's also a potential test.
We also know that like Rishi Sunak won't necessarily do so, right?
For the new British Prime Minister, and he's been facing questions in Parliament this morning, Prime Minister's questions for Rishi Sunak. What are we hearing from him?
Well, UK's government has said that the last vote that happened in 2014, where 55% of voters said they wanted to stay with the UK, that vote should last for at least a generation. And here's what the Prime Minister said this morning.
What right does a man with no mandate have to deny Scottish democracy?
But Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Scottish democracy, I'm pleased that the Scottish Government has one of the most powerful devolved assemblies anywhere in the world. And I'm pleased, and I was pleased very shortly after becoming Prime Minister to be the first Prime Minister in over a decade to attend the Council, to sit down with the First Minister, to explore ways in which we can work together with the Scottish Government to deliver for the people of Scotland.
What?
Now, we are expecting to see rallies in Scottish towns and cities today in response to all of this.
Thank you very much, Ashley Burke in London.
Good evening, my fellow Albertans.
Oh yeah, so like some shit's been popping off with Daniel Smith, so let's take a look.
I'm humbled to speak with you as your premier tonight, and I want you to know how seriously I take the responsibility to serve you in this office. We're facing a very difficult time as a country and as a province. We've been through a lot together these past 3 years, but still have many challenges ahead of us. Tonight I want to address how our government is going to work together with you and your family to overcome these challenges. First off, I wish to address the inflation and affordability crisis. The severity of this crisis has been primarily caused by years of record spending and debt by the federal government in Ottawa, combined with a continual string of anti-energy policies that are driving up the price of fuel, electricity, heating, food, and everything else we need to live and raise our families. Too many moms and dads are having to choose between nutritious food for their children and making their rising mortgage payments. Many seniors are choosing between filling their needed prescriptions and fuel for their vehicles. As a province, we can't...
Okay, so then why do you guys oppose making more things universal then? Explain that to me. Like, it would help out drastically if, you know, if Albertans had access to healthcare that wasn't trying to be privatized and being underfunded, as well as, you know, farmer care to address, you know, the prescriptions that people need to live, whether it be like insulin or like other medications. Or like the healthcare, or like the housing crisis. That, you know, why don't you just fucking do the Swedish model of housing first? And why the fuck don't you do something about the rising gas prices then, or like fucking instead of just bitching about it, and like try, like, go to like the federal government and be like, hey, let's add a fucking windfall tax on corporations and fucking tax big oil more then.
Can't solve this inflation crisis on our own. But due to our strong fiscal position and balanced budget, we can offer substantial relief so Albertans and their families...
A balanced budget isn't necessarily a good thing. Can be pretty shit.
...are better able to manage through this storm. That is why our government will be implementing a series of affordability measures to benefit all Albertans, with additional targeted relief for seniors, the vulnerable, and families. Although details of this Inflation Relief Act are still being finalized, measures will include the following. For seniors and families with dependent children under 18 years of age, we will provide $600 over 6 months for each child as well as each senior. This will be targeted to middle-income families with household incomes below $180,000.
What about low-income families?
The same amount will be provided to vulnerable Albertans collecting AISH and PDD and income support. We will suspend the entire provincial fuel tax for at least the next 6 months and make the current fuel relief program permanent thereafter.
Okay, yeah, sure.
We will index all provincial tax brackets retroactively to 2022, resulting in larger rebates when you file your taxes this spring. We will also index for inflation, AISH, PDD, income support, the seniors benefit, and the Alberta Child and Family Benefit beginning this January. We will provide an increased rebate on consumer electricity bills through the winter months, totaling an additional $200 per household. We will limit spikes in winter electricity rates while continuing with the current natural gas rebate program. And finally, we will invest in food banks and expand low-income transit passes to ensure every Albertan has access to food and mobility for their families.
Sure you will.
These are just first steps, and there's much more to do. But I will ensure every decision our government makes from now until this crisis is over balances affordability for Albertans with the need for continued balanced budgets and fiscal responsibility. Because when our province's financial house is in order, we have the ability to assist Albertans through times of crisis, just like this one. Our province's other big challenge is healthcare. We have amazing frontline staff. Our nurses,
Yeah, but you fuck them over all the time. Like, it's been very apparent that you don't give a shit about the frontline workers.
doctors, paramedics, and other health professionals are truly world-class in every respect. But we have far too many managers and consultants, and not enough health professionals on the front lines caring for patients.
I wonder why that is. Could it be due to the fact that, you know, a lot of healthcare professionals or healthcare workers are walking out on the job because they're not being paid enough? They're not their position or their fuck my brain, their working conditions aren't being met. You know, they're being underfunded and not being able to repair, replace, or get certain things cleaned. Like, there's a lot of aspects to it of why Alberta is not having enough healthcare or medical professionals.
Albertans are waiting too long for emergency room treatment or to have an ambulance arrive when they need it. Surgery times are far.
I mean, an ambulance will, depending on where you live, will definitely take a while to get there, so that doesn't necessarily matter. But like the health, like the emergency care thing is because, like, you know, they need to see someone because their fucking children are getting sick and whatever. Your fucking dumbass doesn't want to do anything about it. Ugh.
Far too lengthy.
Excuse me, I'm
leaving
tired.
many in pain or at unacceptable health risk. The answer is not the opposition's plan to throw billions more into the system. They already.
Wait, what? But like, you guys are fucking cutting education or healthcare spending though, and trying to undermine it so you can fucking privatize it. So no, like, if you actually like fucking put the money that was initially supposed to be going there to the healthcare services, you wouldn't be in this position. And like, actually listen to the healthcare professionals and like other medical staff to see what they actually need, instead of, you know, just not doing anything about it.
Tried that once. It failed and almost bankrupted the province. But maintaining the status quo cannot continue either.
You're probably going to maintain the status quo or underfund everything even more than what you currently are doing, so I don't know what you're going on about.
Albertans want our government to get to work on fixing these problems without delay. That is why last week, Minister Jason Copping and AHS Official Administrator Dr. John Cowell initiated a health reform action plan to specifically target our most urgent healthcare challenges without disrupting frontline services. What does that mean for you and your family? It means more health professionals in emergency rooms to make sure those who need beds get them faster, and those who need a simple prescription or alternate care can get that care without having to be in hospital. It also means ensuring we don't have ambulances waiting with patients at the emergency rooms so our paramedics can get to more calls faster. And it means getting more surgeries done and waitlists decreased by using specialized surgical centers and underutilized rural hospitals and operating rooms that are just sitting there empty. We will also be looking at ways to gradually restore healthcare decision-making to local communities and health professionals on the ground, and to encourage a stronger culture of innovation and patient care. This will take time and patience, of course, but I am confident.
I honestly doubt that she's going to do any of this shit. She's only using it to try and win over the Albertan people, to try and win an election that she's most likely going to lose.
Confident that it will result in better healthcare for Albertans when and where you need it most. Finally, I'd also like to speak about our province's relationship with Ottawa. As Albertans, we love our nation deeply. Canada is our home, and Canadians are family. However, the federal government's treatment of all provinces, most especially Alberta, is unacceptable.
Or maybe could it be due to the fact that you guys are, or that you're doing some absolutely fucking egregious shit that, like, literally goes against, like, constitutional laws? Could that be part of it?
The government in Ottawa is intentionally and systematically attempting to control and regulate all aspects of our province's economy, resources, and social programs. Through equalization and transfers, they funnel billions of your tax dollars away from you and into a black hole of federal bureaucracy and vote-buying arrangements in other parts of the country.
What?
These continual federal attacks on our economy and provincial rights cannot be allowed to continue. The Canadian Constitution is clear. The federal and provincial governments are equals. We both have sovereign areas of exclusive federal and provincial jurisdiction. Albertans, not Ottawa, are in charge of developing and exporting our resources, growing our economy, and delivering healthcare, education, childcare, and other programs in the manner that we, as Albertans, choose. In about a week's time, our government will introduce the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act. This legislation is designed to be a constitutional shield to protect Albertans.
Except the funny thing is it's most likely going to be shot down by the Supreme Court of Canada, so there's that, which I find really funny. Like, it's not going to happen.
So that when Ottawa implements a policy or law attacking our economy or provincial rights, our government will not enforce these unconstitutional measures in Alberta. We will put the rights of Albertans first, always. Now, some are attempting to scare folks into thinking that this legislation has something to do with leaving Canada. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Wexit 2.0.
This new law will have the opposite effect. By restoring and respecting the constitutional rights of our creative and diverse provinces, including Alberta, Canada will become stronger, more prosperous, and more unified than ever. As Albertans, we must no longer ask permission from Ottawa to be prosperous and free. We must be free to chart our own course as a senior partner in a strong and united Canada. In closing, my fellow Albertans, I wish to speak about something personal. Serving as your Premier is by far the most challenging thing I've ever done. I know that I'm far from perfect, and I make mistakes. And having spent decades in media and hosting talk shows, I discussed hundreds of...
Oh no, she's a talk show host, or she was a talk show host. Yeah, it's time to fucking vote the Conservatives or the UCP out of power if you live in Alberta. Like, Jesus Christ, that's an automatic L for Alberta.
Different topics, and sometimes took controversial positions, many of which have evolved or changed as I've grown and learned from listening to you. But I know I'm not a talk show host or a media commentator any longer. That's not my job today. My job today is to serve each and every Albertan with everything I have and to the best of my ability, however imperfect that may be at times. I must be humble, listen, and continue to learn from you. I must also be strong, focused, and determined to do what I believe to be in the best interests of Albertans, no matter how hard that is. But when I'm wrong or make a mistake, I will look to follow the example of our dear departed friend, Premier Ralph Klein, admit to it, learn from it, and get back to work. Because that is the Alberta way.
What?
I love this province and everything it stands for.
I mean, no you don't, because if you love the fucking province, you'd be trying to take care of the people, but you're not doing it. You're not doing that.
We are a land of pioneers and farmers, entrepreneurs and innovators, communities and families.
And the funny thing is that all those people that she's listed off, outside of like maybe some farmers and shit, leave Alberta to go to like Toronto or like Victoria.
A place where the best and brightest come from every corner of this world to join with us in building one of the greatest places on earth to live, work, and raise our families.
It's not true.
Together we can and will overcome every challenge we face to ensure that our province's best days are still to come and that Alberta forever remains strong and free.
Bro, that's so fucking lame.
The air around us is.
Many families in
She's so
Alberta
lame.
are getting a financial boost from the provincial government. Premier Danielle Smith went on television last night to announce payouts of $600 for every child and senior in the province. Hilary Johnstone is in Ottawa. The details of what the Premier announced. Good morning, Hilary.
Good morning, Heather. Well, this affordability package is worth some $2.4 billion, and it is designed to try and help middle and low-income families and seniors in the province of Alberta. All of this is going to be possible because of those hefty oil and gas royalties that are currently in those government coffers. So Premier Danielle Smith, in her first televised address to the province since becoming leader of the UCP, making this announcement. So in part, for example, some of these seniors and families with children under the age of 18, so these are low and middle income families, so families that are making less than $180,000 a year, will receive $100 payments per child or per senior for at least 6 months. A number of other things that are going to be announced as well, including more of a rebate on electricity bills. They're also going to be re-indexing some social programs to inflation, also going to be suspending the provincial fuel tax for at least 6 months as well. So a number of measures here. And we did hear from Danielle Smith on all of this. Here is a little bit of what she said.
Too many moms and dads are having to choose between nutritious food for their children and making their rising mortgage payments. Many seniors are choosing between filling their needed prescriptions and fuel for their vehicles. As a province, we can't solve this inflation crisis on our own. But due to our strong fiscal position and balanced budget, we can offer substantial relief so Albertans and their families are better able to manage through this storm.
So fucking bad, bro.
Now, she also used the opportunity to once again speak about this sort of centerpiece during her campaign to become leader, or the Alberta Sovereignty Act, now being called the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act, which will be introduced in the legislature last week. She made the point last night of saying that if it does become law, that it will act as a constitutional shield within Alberta so that it does not have to adopt legislation by the federal government.
Which literally goes against fucking Supreme Court ruling. She will be challenged on that 100%.
That Alberta does not view or perceives to be harmful to it. So that was also something, Heather, that she discussed last night.
And it was just last night, but any reaction to this so far, Hilary?
Well, with only 6 months to go, about 6 months now before that fixed election date, we did hear from the NDP leader, Rachel Notley. She had a little bit of a rebuttal address. So she said that an NDP government would not hand out sort of payments for just a couple of months, but would try and make affordability an issue overall, said that they would work to rebuild the healthcare system in that province as well. So here is a little bit of what we heard from Rachel Notley.
What we just heard was Danielle Smith claiming she's going to undo the affordability crisis that the UCP government has actually contributed to by reversing many of their own bad decisions. Decisions that have cost Albertans well over $2 billion to date. We're not buying it, and neither should you.
And just finally here, Heather, Danielle Smith also took the opportunity during that televised address to say that she is aware that she has taken some controversial positions in the past during her time in the media. Of course, she has been criticized in recent months for past comments on Ukraine, saying that it should take a neutral position. Also for saying that in her view, the unvaccinated were the most discriminated against group in Alberta's history. So
which is really funny.
Once again to say that she is listening and learning and that she does not intend to take some of these controversial positions as Premier in the future.
Hilary Johnstone, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A heartbreaking one out of Alberta. A paramedic in the province who was called to a crash last week. What she didn't realize, the victim she was trying to save was in fact her own daughter. The daughter's injuries were too severe. Jamie Erickson, her name. She lost her 17-year-old daughter Montana that day, and she is speaking now. Let's listen in here.
Firstly, thanks for everybody coming out and sharing my story. Getting my beautiful daughter's name out there. She meant the world to all of us. This tragedy is not only felt here in this community, it's felt throughout the province and maybe even the country. I think every first responder can relate to the pain that we're feeling. Nobody wants to go through anything like this, and I just want my baby girl's memory to live on, and I want everybody to know how much she meant to us and how much she means to all of my coworkers.
So sad.
Anybody who knew Montana, they'd call her a firecracker. She would love fiercely if you were her friend. She would love you to the end of the world and back, and she would do anything for you. She was a fighter, and she fought until the day that she died. And she was beautiful. She was so beautiful. If she ever put an effort into anything, she would always succeed at it. A very successful swimmer throughout her years. Aspirations of being a lawyer post-high school. She was a very funny girl, and we all loved her very much. In the end, Montana was able to give one last gift, and she was able to donate her organs, and of her organs, 2 of them that were donated were life-saving, and we're so happy to know that our baby girl is living on through others, and she has, in the wake of this tragedy, she has saved other people. We know it's what she would have wanted, and we are so proud of her. And we're gonna miss her very, very much. We thank all of the support that we've gotten from every first responder. We've had people reaching out from across the country, into America and even overseas. And I know it's felt hard and everybody is hurting, and I just want everybody to know that we thank them, and we know that they share our pain. Montana's going to be greatly missed by everyone, and we love her so very much.
Too young. She died way too young.
I guess so. Yeah. We can take a couple questions. Maybe we'll start on the left here.
Jamie, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Incredibly. Tell us. Family, your first responder family, what does that mean to you to have them here with you today?
It's huge for me. I know a lot of people here I've worked closely with. They know my daughter through me, so they feel my pain. But I also know that all of my coworkers who are parents as well, they know that this is our worst fear, and I know that they don't wish it upon anybody, and they understand, even though it's not their daughter, it is their daughter, and they understand the pain and the hole that I feel in my heart, and their support is amazing, and it's overwhelming, and their support will never, there are no words to describe the support that I've been getting, that we've been getting.
What was it about her that made her that firecracker?
Well, she's her mother's daughter, so that's the first thing. But Montana was very involved in community. She was a swimmer in Okotoks, and then when we moved up north here, she was a swimmer at Nose Creek Swim Association. A very successful swimmer, climbing to 5th in Canada at one point, at 13 years old, making the Canadian Junior Championships. At 13, I had to pay to watch my daughter swim. Very proud moments with her. Very supportive of all of her friends. People just loved her. She loved her friends fiercely, and she would do anything for them.
I wonder if this was like an instance of drunk driving. Because generally speaking, whenever someone dies from a fatal crash, it's usually due to drunk driving.
She was very creative. Her writing skills blew me away. Sometimes some things that she would write to me, or some analogies that she would do of books and movies. I would often say to her, you know, did you just copy and paste that? Because she was so articulate, very creative girl, and you know, I just wonder what she would have been with her life.
We have time for one more.
This is my brother, Montana's uncle. This is my husband, her dad, and then close family friends who have been with me through all of this.
All right, so we were listening to the story of an Alberta paramedic, Jamie Erickson, discussing how she treated her own daughter after a crash. It happened in Airdrie, Alberta on the 15th of November. When she arrived on the scene, she did not realize it was her daughter at first, and then, of course, quickly realized that it was her daughter, Montana. The injuries sustained in the crash were too serious, and her daughter died. She was airlifted to the Foothills Medical Center, but the RCMP, of course, were also on the scene, and they informed her that Montana had died of her injuries. She died later in hospital as a result. Just hearing a little bit of Jamie Erickson and what that was like as a mother to go through that, as a paramedic, talking a little bit about her daughter, saying she was a firecracker, she was full of life, and how she had died.
Okay, this will be the last thing we'll do. And after that, probably in stream. So, a couple days ago, there was a protest in Manitoba that calls for safer consumption sites. A group of about 100 people gathered and danced in a circle to a beat of drums near the Manitoba legislature on Thursday afternoon, calling for the progressive conservative government to heed calls for supervised consumption sites. Traffic was blocked at the intersection of Broadway and Osborne Street for about 20 minutes by the protest, which began just after 3 p.m. Traffic was blocked at the knowledge keeper Leslie Spilett says, with people dying due to toxic drug supply in the city, there is an immediate need for a site that would give people a safer place to use drugs, which overdosing is definitely a gigantic problem within Winnipeg, for sure. Like, it's not just like, you know, fucking crack and shit, it's also like opioids. There's a gigantic opioid problem like as well. We know that we have solutions in the community that can, if not altogether stop it, at least to reduce the numbers of those unnecessary deaths, she says. Our youth should not be dying because of our because our drug supply is toxic. By not providing a consumption site, the province is complicit with those deaths, said Spillett. Their blood is on their hands. Last year, 407 Manitobans died of overdose to excellent substances like fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, ethyloam, or a combination of substances, according to the data from Chief Medical Examiner, more than any 1 year. It's kind of strange that they're keeping out opioids in that as well. The provincial government has previously indicated under both former Premier Brian Pallister and his successor Heather Stephenson that it did not plan to allow supervised sites to elicit consumption. In an interview with CBC last week, Stephenson pointed to uninitiated consequences in other jurisdictions to explain why she doesn't support the creation of supervised consumption sites in Manitoba. The funny thing is that with even within Canada ourselves, we have evidence of supervised sites for drug consumption to help people like not fucking die and like help people get off of drugs, like BC's Clean Needle program, for example. News release from the province last week said it is committed to a recovery-oriented model. Progressive conservative government approach is to maximize investments in programs and services such as the province's rapid access to addiction medication, or RAM, clients, and quote, ensuring treatment is available to Manitobans when they are ready to recover, the November 10th release said. Manitoba Harm Reduction Network Education coordinator Jordan Sheldon said, who organized Thursday's protests, said the province needs to consult with experts who advocate for safe consumption sites, pay attention to scientific evidence in order to prevent more overdose deaths. We are tired of the provincial government not listening to the calls from harm reduction organizations across the province who have made it clear that we need safer consumption sites in order to keep our relatives safe, Sheldon said. She said the idea for the protest came following the network's recent conference in which Albert McLeod, a Two-Spirit elder and member of the Nissequoia Sheik Cree Nation, encouraged organizations to demand action for the province. Well, I hope this sends the message that we are not only committed to loving our relatives and keeping them safe with little funding that we do get, but that we will come to the streets and we will not stop fighting until we get safer consumption, and ultimately until we get safer supply, Sheldon said. So, yeah. That's where I'm going to call it for today then. There was a decent amount of stuff to cover and everything, and I think we got through it all pretty well. So, yeah, tomorrow will be 3 houses, and we'll have fun with that. Until